Welcome to Pick Me Up, I'm Scared, the podcast.
I'm your host, Madeline.
And I'm your co-host, David.
David, we skipped last week on the pod.
Yeah, you were out of town and I was moving.
Yeah, but your new apartment?
It's sick. I got a pool.
It's very nice. One bedroom?
It's a one bed. Like,
You're
there's
moving
a
up.
door between where I sleep and where I live.
Yeah.
Which is...
It's impressive, honestly.
Yeah.
I'm so proud.
There's a sliding glass door to the pool, which is shocking.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you live in a McMansion now, basically.
I do. I'm rich.
You're Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, I love it.
First floor, one bedroom. That's what Jeff Bezos has, right?
I mean, ground floor.
Ground floor. I wake up every day to my upstairs neighbors playing with their 3-year-old.
Oh, that's cute.
That's cute. It's not my favorite thing.
I mean, yeah, the noise you live in a city. Yeah. What are you going to do?
I don't know. They're fine after, like, that 5 minutes that they're playing together. I think that's probably the only interaction they have with their kid.
I mean, kids grow up so fast.
Yeah.
That kid's going to be in preschool and kindergarten before you know it.
And my rent will be in the, tens of thousands of dollars.
I think that rent cap means it can only go up 4% per year here.
Okay.
So you're okay.
Yeah.
You're all right. Okay, some housekeeping. Let's see. First off, over on the Patreon, we are still doing 2 bonus episodes per month. I think last month we only did 1, but the month before we did 3, so I'm counting it.
Yeah,
I think it balanced out. Yeah. So for $3 a month, you can get some bonus content over on our Patreon. It's going to be a good time. David, what are we recording this week for the Patreon?
We're talking about hip consumerism, market segmentation, and subcultures.
Yeah, so this is going to be cool. It's about like identity through consumption.
Yeah. And is there a way of identifying oneself apart from consumption?
Oh, God, I hate that question.
I don't think there is.
I think you might be accurate. So that's going to be a fun discussion that we got going on over there this week. So our Patreon is patreon.com/pickmeupimscared. Again, $3, 2 bonus episodes a month. And there's access to some old stuff I posted there too. If you need help with budgeting, there's my budget template. If you want to know a cheap grocery plan, my cheapest grocery plan I ever used is up there. All that good stuff. Another thing for housekeeping is the book. I have to keep promoting the book.
Oh.
They like it when I promote the book.
The book is good.
The people are liking the book.
I gave a copy of your book to someone who really loved it. She said she cried.
Wow, people have told me that they cried, yeah. It has really good reviews on Goodreads, and I'm very, very happy that people like it, because when I wrote it, I was like, this is garbage, and everybody's going to hate it. But the reviews have been good. I think we have like 4.8 stars on Goodreads, which is pretty impressive. Who
are the dissenters? Have you found dissenters yet? Have you gone and done the thing where you exclusively read the bad reviews?
Yeah, there's only one bad review, and I actually read it on one of our episodes, and it was this guy who didn't like that I pointed out there was a systemic reason for poverty existing. He was like, oh, if you just want to whine and blame other people for your problems, you're going to love this book. And I was like, yes, it is somebody else's problem. Everything is systemic. Very few things are issues of personal accountability in this world. So that was my one bad review. Everybody else, though, has been really positive, and I feel very, very fortunate. Another thing people have said is that it's a really fast read, and I like that, because I feel like that means I used accessible language, and my editor helped make sure I didn't get too pedantic and in the weeds with like the econ and political stuff.
Yeah.
Because my first instinct was to
rewrite what is to be done for Gen Z.
Yeah, pretty much. So she helped me a lot curb that, kind of roll that back. And I think it ended up being, very, very easy to read. So if you haven't checked it out yet, your library probably has it, but I have been told everybody's libraries have like 14-week waiting lists for them.
You are a book celebrity.
I am a New York Times bestseller.
Jonathan Franzen, Eat Your Heart Out.
Eat Your Heart Out. So you can also get it online if you don't want to wait for the library version. And if you want to do the audiobook, yes, I read it. All right. So aside from that, is there anything else you want to add for housekeeping?
I went to the protest yesterday in downtown. I figure, do you want to talk about that? Or?
Oh, yeah. You had a really good experience.
It was, I'm just going to say, for anyone feeling real hopeless and really defeated and powerless, this won't make you feel those things any less, but it will make you feel something good in addition, and it will point you in the direction of doing something.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we were talking about how we think that people are, I mean, I said this, I was like, I feel like, not to be like trite or cliche, but I feel like people are starting to really wake up to like the real world ramifications of US imperialism.
Yeah, one of the things that I was talking with my sister about yesterday was that when, the Iraq War protests happened in 2003, the overwhelming sense you got was of liberalism offended. Like, the war wasn't being fought on legal ground.
Do you really think that?
Right, it was like Colin Powell lied to us, but if it right,
if the WMDs had really been there, it would be fine.
Yeah, and so
I don't know though, because I remember we were all just yelling "No blood for oil."
Yeah, but it the idea there, at least that was a part of it, right? Like this very we were good liberals and we wish the war if the war at the time, I even remember people contrasting it to Afghanistan, which was somehow justified as a thing. And this wasn't our little crowd's MO, but that was a huge...
That was maybe the older people at the protests we were at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was a bunch of... I have never been among so many people or heard so many passionate and amazing speakers who were very clear about the fact that the pill is poison from the get-go. There's no saving the system.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree. I think that I think I call it the anti-Jon Stewartification.
Yeah.
Of the average person. When you think about the person who maybe growing up was center left. They were a Democrat and they watched The Daily Show, When we were growing up, The Daily Show was Jon Stewart, and I feel like it was ubiquitous. I feel like it was really popular. They weren't maybe reading theory. They weren't anti-capitalist. They never thought to question capitalism. But I feel like that person is even being pushed further left now.
Yeah.
And I think that is promising and inspiring. And I think an important thing to point out is that we're still fighting wars for oil. It's still no blood for oil, right?
Yeah.
Because a thing that people don't think about is Israel's proximity to the Suez Canal and how that's a major transportation route to import oil.
Yeah.
For places like the United States and, Western Europe to consume. So it's we're still fighting the same wars over and over and over again. And I think people have war fatigue. People have genocide fatigue. People are I am so tired of my money going to fund American weapons being dropped on innocent civilians in other countries. And yeah, so I think there is something inspiring about just how over it people are getting.
And I think it seems as though, in addition to the fatigue, it's just over, your money. It's just being asked to witness violence on such a mass scale and then being asked to turn away or to just act like nothing's happening.
To normalize it,
it.
That is something I think the role of social media has been really, really useful. Think about if people had all had access to smartphones and Twitter during the Iraq War or the Afghanistan War or the Vietnam War or the Korean War. So many people today still don't know what the Korean War was even actually about. And I feel like if we had smartphones and Twitter, more people would understand the nature of the Korean War or the nature of what was happening in Vietnam. So I think that I talked about this actually on my TikTok, but I think we are in this rare situation where the propaganda that these massive countries are able to put out is not able to keep up with just a 22-year-old with a smartphone.
Yeah.
And I don't know how long that'll last. I think the propagandists will get more sophisticated, unfortunately, but I think right now we're kind of in this golden age of technology where you look at what, for example, the IDF is putting out, and you're this is blatant propaganda, and there are no sources for this, and none of this can be corroborated, and this looks fake to even look at. And then you look at a video of somebody who's my whole family just died because my apartment complex was blown up by an American-made bomb that Israel launched here.
Yeah.
And you can tell the difference. You can see it. And I think that really is a big wake-up call for a lot of people, and it's horrifying, but there is some, at least I don't know, maybe sense of solidarity with other people where you can look at somebody next to you and be oh my God, this is really happening, isn't it? And they look back at you and they go, yeah, it's really happening.
Yeah. And I will say, for me at least, going to the march, getting that call to action from people, who were involved and who had real personal connections, was really, I don't feel hope because of it. I don't feel as though I did anything practical, right? Like, it's still a march.
Right.
But it was something. I don't know how else to put it without sounding cynical and defeated. But
No.
do you know what I mean?
I do. I felt the same way during the Black Lives Matter marches or protests. I felt the same way when we went to, the post 9/11 war protests. Like, that is how you feel. I think it is really good and important. I would have gone with you, but I was helping a friend who needed some help with something. So, but yeah, that is something small and positive you can take from the chaos and of the hellscape.
Yeah.
Is that there are other people who also notice we are in the middle of a hellscape.
That's the
so
best
you're not
we can
alone.
ask
Yeah,
for.
that's the best you can ask for right now, I guess. You're not alone. Okay, so do we have anything else we want to talk about for housekeeping before we get into the episode?
I think we're good.
Okay, well, on that note, today's episode, like most episodes, is about violence and horror.
That sounds fun.
That sounds like us, right?
Yeah.
But again, it is a systemic type of violence and horror. So I'm going to start off the intro by asking you, David, have you ever been victimized by a libertarian?
What do you mean?
Probably just have you ever had to talk to a libertarian?
Well, you know who was a libertarian? Our teenage speech and debate coach.
That makes so much sense. I didn't know that, but that really makes sense.
She once gave me the collected works, the whole collected works of Ayn Rand, which essays. Actually, I'm going to call this victimization because I read those damn things.
Wow, you read them.
Yeah, and the only good thing Ayn Rand has ever written was a letter to Cat Fancy magazine.
Oh, I don't like that. That humanizes her.
It's a funny essay.
Yeah, that seems like it is funny. That does make sense that our speech and debate coach would be a libertarian because she was very religious, I remember.
She was.
But then sometimes she would do fun things like she taught me how to run from the cops when you were speeding and they started chasing you with their headlights on. No,
she used to do drag races in the vans we would use to transport ourselves to various tournaments.
Yeah. So yes, that makes sense. The thing I thought of when I think about having to interact with libertarians is that one time I accidentally ended up in a whole house of them. I went to hang out with an ex-boyfriend and he had some new roommates that he had met on the internet.
So he had joined a cult.
Basically, the house was beautiful though. Oh my God. Mid-Wilshire, Victorian maybe? It was wild. I was like, how is this house here? Gorgeous. So I go inside with two of my friends and the dude bro roommates are maybe trying to hit on us, and they start talking about politics to make themselves sound smart, and me and my two other little manic pixie dream girl friends just start ripping these guys apart. We find out they're libertarians. I start making fun of one, and he's like, we know the thing about America that's so great is anybody can accomplish anything. So I walked him through. I was like, oh, okay, what about my friend's mom? She's a garment worker in downtown LA. What do you do for a living? And he's like, I do motion graphics. And I was like, cool, I know a little bit about that. I had a boyfriend who did motion graphics. So how does she become a motion graphics artist? Walk me through where she's starting now as a garment worker and got her to a motion graphics degree and working in a major studio. Let's go. Let's do this thought experiment. About 6 or 7 minutes into the thought experiment, he got so mad. He threw something and stood up and left the room. And he turned around and he told my ex-boyfriend, I didn't realize you were going to bring, I can't remember the word he used to describe it, freakazoid sorority sisters over here to fight with us or something.
I'm sorry, freakazoid sorority sisters sounds like a pretty good second or maybe third run 90s grunge band of the
totally.
L7 variety.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I have been thinking kind of about libertarians lately.
Why have you been thinking about libertarians? Why are you punishing yourself?
I don't know. I don't know why I do it. Mostly maybe the bear story. The time they tried to take over the town and then it got overrun with bears. Kenna loves this story.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking about this story that Kenna talks about a lot. They did take over a town in New Hampshire, and because there were no laws about what you had to do with your trash, because the libertarians were down with regulation, a bunch of bears just took over all of the town because they started eating the trash.
This seems like the libertarian dream in the sense that the strong defeated the weak.
The Bears won.
The Bears
It's
won.
true.
This is libertarianism in its purest and best form.
Yeah.
The Bears won.
Sometimes the Bears win. There was also a town in Texas where this like really young guy, like maybe he was a teenager, he came up with the idea to make this town in Texas run as a libertarian city, and all the adults were like, got it, you're hired. And they elected a mayor, and like the whole town fell apart. And then he went on to be in all these like right-wing think tanks and like advise all of these right-wing high up politicians, and meanwhile the town just like totally collapsed, and they got to the point where they were doing city hall meetings inside of a bar, and then eventually the guy who owned the bar was like, you guys can't do this in here anymore.
I'm sorry, like, you don't make me a libertarian. Like,
Sounds like a real good time to
like,
you.
he destroyed a town and made them go to the bar to figure out what to do.
Yeah, and then, but now he has this career, this like illustrious career in politics as though he's a smart man, when he literally just broke a city, and then everyone was like, we like you, kid, you got moxie, come join the team.
If you think of a city as like an organizational structure with rules and regulations about how you are supposed to behave, breaking a city is fundamentally the libertarian goal.
It really is. That is so true. And also I think that guy was just like a really good example of like failing up. Like, I think that there's some category of like political acceleration in the United States where like if you fail hard enough, people notice you and they find you inspiring. And then you just magically get a career with like a 6-figure salary and like 3 vacation houses and a yacht.
Wait, why has this not happened to me yet?
Well, we got to go more right wing with it, I think.
Oh, I can't just do like I can't just fail in a normal non-political way.
No, you have to fail spectacularly in the like sightline of the media in a super right wing way.
So I'm joining the Heritage Foundation.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, this is exactly what you have to do. So I was thinking about all these guys, and I was like, you know what? We should really talk about their economic overlord.
Their economic daddy.
Yes, Papa.
Yeah.
Papa Milton Friedman.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really going to be what the episode is about, just Milton Friedman. He is responsible, I'm going to say, for maybe everything bad.
I think that don't give the guy too much credit.
Okay.
They're like Ronald Reagan, Nancy Reagan. We've talked
mean,
about the Henry Kissinger's out there.
But he was an economic advisor to Ronald Reagan for a while, and he and Kissinger kind of worked together on a bunch of projects.
No, I mean, there are all of these sort of, I don't know how else to say it, Waldo-esque figures for someone who looks a little like Waldo.
You're allowed to say it. You can reclaim Waldo.
I am reclaiming Waldo every day.
Mm-hmm.
Who just pop up everywhere.
Yeah,
They're just...
This is so true. When you're looking at the trash heap of American history and all the evils we have done around the world, you will start to see these names just like reappear. Like Ronald Reagan, yes. Milton Friedman, definitely. Henry Kissinger, he's in there. Mm-hmm. Like, they just keep popping up like whack-a-mole. And I think, though, I don't know, like, the Milton Friedman thing is interesting because I'm now like, well, who influenced that guy? Was that
like Hayek and all of those guys?
Well, yeah. Hayek was a contemporary of Milton Friedman's.
Were they ever at Chicago at the same time?
They were in this other... I want to say secret society because it sounds exciting, but I don't think it was actually They were in a different society together.
They were just like a club.
They were in a club.
Yeah.
They were in a club. So it's all these bad men. And the interesting thing about this, because I'm like, how do you make economics interesting? And the thing I want people to know is like, one, like economics sounds boring, especially when you're taking classes in it, but these guys are ruining your life.
And the funny thing that you learn is they're doing it under the name of science.
And it's not science at all.
It's just some bullshit that they thought sounded good.
Yeah, like there was somebody on the internet who was like, oh, economics is just like the dude version of astrology.
Yeah.
And it is so accurate. It's just like vibes people are going with. And they're like, this feels like it should be true to me. So it's really just these usually men who are utterly destroying the planet. And they're ruining your life. And they are directly affecting your ability to have a good life. And they have no fucking clue what they're talking about or why they're doing it.
Well, this is funny because I dated a woman a while ago who actually went to the U of Chicago like MBA program. And
Wild.
Was like thought of herself as lefty.
Okay, probably for the University of Chicago, I bet she was. Because she was like, we don't need to kill the poors. We can just put them in a cage somewhere.
But the thing that you hear from these people is like, as a model, it's pure science, it's pure math, it makes perfect sense. but just in the real world is messy. But as a model, it's the only one we have, and it's the best one.
Inaccurate. Both.
Yeah.
It is not the only one we have, and it is not the best one. And
Yeah.
you know what? It does not make sense as a model, also.
No, it's a stupid, bad model.
It is a bad model. So, you know, I was thinking about all this stuff about Milton Friedman because, yeah, when we talked about Reagan, he's just like this weird infantile sock puppet man.
Yeah,
He just outputs whatever input he receives that morning.
The only thing he's guilty of is having a pretty face.
Okay, all right. Okay, I don't know about that. I think he's guilty of a lot more shit than that. But I will say Milton was probably some sort of like evil U.S. president puppet master because he was pulling the strings for Reagan. He was pulling the strings for Nixon. He was pulling a lot of strings to some really bad dudes. So I think that the thing I'm going to struggle with in this episode is getting through this stuff in a way where I really can like communicate how relevant it all is to our lives.
Like, the fact is that, what's that, like, Overton window bullshit?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, Milton Friedman defines the Overton window.
Yes,
Right?
he's setting the rules. He is making up the rules for the game we're all playing.
And, like, what is sayable within that game?
Yes.
Like...
Totally. So, you know, if you're an American, this has some real direct impact on your life. If you're not an American, it still impacts you because, like, let's say you're in a country that's been exploited by the United States and, you know, maybe you're in a harsh place and you need to take out a loan and maybe you get that loan from the International Monetary Fund. And then the International Monetary Fund is like, oh, you can only get the loan if you do all of these economic policies we say are going to make your country so successful. Milton Friedman invented all those policies, and spoiler alert, they don't make anybody's country more successful.
And it's basically deregulation. Is
privatization.
And privatization.
It's all the stuff you hate Reagan for. It's this guy. So if you're going to listen to this episode, I think it might be cool to go back and listen to episodes 98 and 99 about Ronald Reagan and episode number 80 about the IMF. Those are a good starting place. But also, if you don't want to, you'll be able to follow this one just fine.
And also, I mean, Milton Friedman in a more direct way had negative impacts on, for example, Chile and other kind of like...
Oh, we're going to talk about Chile in a major way. So... You know, I feel like everything I knew about Milton, as we'll call him, just because I think the name...
I'm sorry, are we not going with Milt?
I was thinking Milty for a little bit,
Milty.
but it sounds kind of cute. It's too cute. Milty boy?
I feel like anything, any diminutive kind of name, right? Like that, like it's like what you would call a little boy.
Do you think that's... Okay, do you think it's good because it diminishes his it takes away his power, or do you think it's bad because it makes him sound cute?
I mean, he is something of an enfant terrible or whatever, an infant terrible.
Yeah, he is.
Terrible
a
baby.
terrible baby. He is a terrible baby.
And terrible babies deserve cute diminutive names.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So we can go Milty boy, Milton. We'll use them interchangeably. I feel like most of what I know about him for a long time probably came from The Shock Doctrine, Naomi Klein's book.
Yeah.
Came out in 2007, 2008, prime time, right? Because it's a book about capitalism, like needing basically catastrophes so that people like Milton Friedman have the opportunity to come in, torch everything, and build a new system in its place.
Yeah.
And this was wild timing for this book to come out because the Great Recession was 2008.
I mean, she saw the writing on the wall.
She really did. And I think for a while, I kind of like wrote Naomi Klein off as like a lib. I was like, no, whatever.
No, I mean, she...
You know, like No Logo was a book she wrote that I thought was kind of cheesy.
Yeah.
But when I really went back and kind of reread parts of The Shock Doctrine for this episode, I was like, you know, she had some good journalism in there. She had some good reporting.
It's a great read. Like you
is.
You might not be like, oh my God, I would agree with Naomi Klein on every damn issue under the sun, but she is a good journalist.
I found myself doing the same thing. I reread parts of this book and I was like, you know, that's not exactly what I would agree with, but overall this book was really, really worthwhile. So if you've been on the fence about reading it, you know, rereading a huge chunk of it for this episode, I'd say go for it. I'd say read it. I think it'll be worthwhile. So we're going to talk about Milton Friedman, and the way we're going to structure this episode is we're going to talk kind of about his early life and then his career. Then we're going to do a huge chunk about Chile, what happened there. And then we're going to talk about kind of the end of his life and the effects of his policies today.
Yeah.
So starting off, Milton Friedman was born July 31st, 1912 in Brooklyn. I did not get his astrological sign, but I know he is a Leo.
You just know it?
I just know because my boyfriend's a Leo and his birthday is July 25th, and I'm a Leo and I'm August 17th, and he's right in between us.
Okay.
So, I'm going to say Milton is a stereotypical Leo. He likes the attention. He loves to fight.
This is sounding a lot like you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe he's me if I were evil.
Jury's out.
Oh, okay. So the next year, though, after he's born, his family moves to Rahway, New Jersey. And this is really where Milton grew up. He describes his family as being like warm and supportive, but the family was kind of broke. He described the income as small and highly uncertain, which is like, who talks that way? But okay, whatever. He did really well in school, but his senior year of high school, his dad died. So he was picking up some odd jobs to kind of help support the family. And in 1928, he ended up getting a scholarship to Rutgers University, which is a public state university in New Jersey. Do you know anything about Rutgers, David? Do you know about colleges?
Yeah, the Rutgers, I feel like it's one of those schools that I'm going to say gives an off-brand Ivy impression.
Oh, okay.
Right, like, because it's like a public college, right? But it's
nice.
Fancy.
Okay, got it.
Fancy.
All right, cool. So there he studied math and economics, and he was really influenced by this new assistant professor of economics there named Arthur Burns. And Friedman ultimately would be like, yeah, Arthur Burns was kind of my mentor. He really influenced me. And one of the things that Burns did was introduce Milton to Alfred Marshall's Principles of Economics. And this text really popularized the use of supply and demand functions as a way to determine what the price of things should be. And this would be, if you've read Marx, right?
Yeah.
David, how does Marx determine the price of items?
What, commodity and money value shit? Is this what we're talking about?
Yeah, it's just like kind of the idea that things have a certain value because of the cost of, making them, and that includes the labor, the work people put into it, that helps determine things. So this would be different than kind of like a Marxist way of assessing value, right?
It should also be noted, like Marx, being Marx, points out that there's a dialectical relationship between value and the form of labor and the form of commodity.
And that's like the really fun stuff he talks about.
That's the fun stuff,
yeah. He talks about the like commodity, like the fetishization of commodity in an interesting way.
Yeah, and value determines the form of labor as labor determines value.
Right. So this would be kind of an opposite approach. So Alfred Marshall's just kind of like, it's all about supply and demand, baby. Like if I have 5 $1 screws and you're building a bookshelf and you're short 5 $1 screws, suddenly those screws aren't $1 anymore. They're $50 because you need them.
He is only, in Marx terms, talking about exchange value. He is reducing everything to exchange value.
Yeah, so he's talking about how also he says the lower the supply, the higher demand, the more expensive things should be. But this also was part of this thing called the marginalist revolution, which was this idea that consumers will adjust their consumption until this thing called marginal utility equals the price. And that sounds complicated. So marginal utility is just a fancy way of saying, how useful is this thing that you have purchased, this good or service?
And use is not
use
can also be enjoyment or shit like that, right?
Yeah, you can get real pomo with how you're defining use.
It's everything.
It's everything. It's, just this idea that if you spend a lot on something, you'll want to get a lot out of that experience. And if you don't spend much on something, you won't be concerned with how much use or enjoyment you get out of it.
Yeah. I mean, we'll, I guess, kind of talk about this in the bonus episode, because a lot of marketing and a lot of trying to do the economy is basically taking two basically similar things and trying to differentiate them based off of bullshit.
Right.
Right.
You need this one. You need cog A. Now you need cog B.
Or I'm a Chevy guy versus a Ford guy.
Yes, totally.
And it's the same shit.
And it's the same thing. Yeah. So all of this stuff about how we assign value to things we purchase as consumers, this supply and demand thing, what the price of things should be, how much we use things based on what we perceive their value to be, all of this was really appealing to Milton. Milton was a fan of this guy, Alfred Marshall. And he once described Marshall's work as, quote, an engine for the discovery of concrete truth. And this just kills me because David and I touched on this early, in the intro here, but there is no concrete truth in economics.
No, it's speculation.
It is. And people will try to pass this off like it's a science, but top economists are consistently wrong in their predictions for economic trends. Even at the Federal Reserve, which supposedly has the finest economists in the world, right? They have a terrible track record of predicting even short-term trends like inflation or GDP. Like in 2023, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and Fed Chairman Jerome Powell, who are both Ivy League educated economists, were wrong, for example, about predicting inflation. Nobel Prize winner Paul Krugman was also wrong, and he had to publicly admit that he made a huge mistake in talking about inflation. In 2021, in fact, 16 out of the 36 living American Nobel economists declared incorrectly that, quote, whatever upward pressure on prices, all this new money, i.e. the government stimulus that was entering, during COVID lockdowns, might bring, there was no threat of inflation. So that means that 44% of all living top-ranked economists failed to accurately predict the market. Now, I will say that people have found that government stimulus checks to individuals did not create inflation whatsoever. Yeah. We know that up to 50% of all inflation we've seen recently has literally just been the result of corporations being like, there's an opportunity, we can charge more, let's just see what happens. And that has been something that has been statistically proven.
Which also is going to tell the lie of the supply and demand bullshit, because
people are buying it, so they must demand it.
Yeah.
Right. So this is all this weird self-affirming circle, but regardless of how you look at it, inflation did happen, and none of these fancy Ivy League economists could predict it. Other models we take as truth, quote unquote truth, in economics have also consistently proven to be deeply flawed. For example, there's this one idea about the relationship between unemployment and inflation that ended up getting debunked. The whole idea of free trade has been debunked a number of times. This idea that there's a correlation between budget deficits and economic growth, the way people think about that, has been debunked a lot. Using the free market to dictate workers' wages rather than just steadily increasing minimum wages, that has been debunked. Despite that, though, people still believe this. They believe it almost religiously. They look at these free market ideals like it's God, and they put their faith in it.
Yeah, I mean, I think liberal economics, including libertarian economics,
yes,
the whole of the goddamn thing mistakes the metaphors used in their little books, Free Hand of the Market or Invisible Hand of the Market, for somehow truth. It mistakes it for actual specific descriptions of things that happen in a way that does feel very religious.
Yeah, and also I think the use of the word free there, we'll get into this later, but a lot of these economists, when we talk about them, they correlate free markets with freedom.
Yeah, and we can talk about what freedom is at some point, but this ain't it.
Yeah, no, it's really, really interesting. So despite knowing that all this stuff is definitely not concrete truth, there is no concrete truth in economics. People are constantly floating new ideas, discarding old ideas, being like, that model didn't work. What if we try this? What about this? Despite all of that, Milton was all in on Marshall. He's like, Marshall is truth. And he really believed that economics in general was a math problem with tangible, finite, true results. And if you just solved the equations, Milton believed you would understand how the world, quote, really works. So this is Milton's ideology that he is picking up on in college, in undergrad.
I mean, this also just seems like the dominant ideology at the time.
It was actually an emerging ideology at the time. Okay. Because what's important to note is that we were coming off of Great Depression era thinking as we move forward. Keynesian economics
is kind of the big thing.
Right. So for anybody who doesn't know, we'll talk about Keynes kind of a lot in this, but Keynes was basically look, I hate communism as much as the next guy. I hate socialism, love capitalism, but I think it's time for us all to acknowledge that capitalism kind of falls apart a lot. So I was thinking, to make sure we don't go full-blown commie mode, maybe, just maybe, the government needs to not do so much free hand of the market, free, laissez-faire, let the invisible hand guide everything, whatever happens, happens, and we vibe it. What if we tried planning just a little bit? Just a little bit. And Keynes's ideas originally were considered heterodox economic theory, meaning they were outliers in economic theory. People were like, this is fringe economics, this does not make sense, this is not the free market of Adam Smith. But when they implemented this following the Great Depression, they were like, oh, this actually works. And that's when the Fed was created to help set interest rates and kind of start controlling things a little bit more. Not a lot, but a little bit more. And suddenly Keynesian economics moves into being this dominant form of economic theory from the 1930s through the 1950s. So 1932 comes around, Milton gets his bachelor's degree, and then he goes to the University of Chicago for his master's. And David, what do you know about the University of Chicago?
It's in Hyde Park. It's a giant university. There are more grad students than undergrads, I believe. It did produce like a whole school of economics called the I think it's the School of University of Chicago or something. Or
Yeah.
sometimes the Chicago Boys, who are all these like hyper conservative libertarian assholes.
Yeah. So the University of Chicago is considered a really good school.
Yeah, it's great. It's Ivy adjacent.
It's Ivy adjacent, yes. And a lot of the ideas being talked about here, there's like a consistent messaging in most of the programs. And the consistent messaging is this very free market, business is God kind of thinking.
I will say for many, many years, a philosopher who's very liberal but who I love nonetheless, Martha Nussbaum, has taught there and has written very beautiful essays on things like objectification.
Yeah.
So
And
it's not all bad.
they also have an art program.
Yeah,
The
that's
famous
cool.
art program, yeah. So in the 1930s, as Milton is entering the University of Chicago for his master's degree, this guy Frank Knight ends up founding the Chicago School of Economics. So right around this time is when this gets founded. And like David talked about, this is a really conservative economic, kind of school. It's neoclassical. That's the word that is used to describe this neoclassical economic school. And sorry, there's a really loud car outside. You can probably hear it in the
I think
recording.
that was a motorcycle.
Oh, maybe. Okay, yeah. So neoclassical economics just says supply and demand, remember, right, the Marshall thing. Supply and demand are the driving forces behind the production, pricing, and consumption of goods and services, and products do have value beyond the cost of materials plus labor, and that value comes from the customer's perception of the item. And this part, I think there is something to be said for it. I related to this because at my job, I work in apparel, right? Customers, for some reason, for example, think cotton is a high quality fabric, despite it literally being the cheapest fabric on the market.
Yeah.
The cotton is so cheap, and also, like, unless it's organic cotton, it's really, really bad for the planet to grow cotton. We're from the Central Valley. I rail against this all the time. The Central
it's
Valley was
really
destroyed by cotton farming.
water intensive, right?
It's really water intensive. There's a lot of chemicals that you use. The chemical runoff is atrocious for families living in the areas. There's increased risks of everything from cancer to blue baby syndrome. It pollutes entire farmlands, so the lands can't be reused. I mean, cotton is called the world's dirtiest crop. It is not a clean crop to grow at all. And yet, customers associate it as being a natural fiber, so good for the planet, and an expensive fiber, even though it is literally the cheapest and most abundant fiber you can find.
I mean, I think this also points out two things, one of which is like what we call like cost and what we call value, right? Like the cost, the deleterious environmental and health effects of cotton
Oh, and predominantly communities of color.
don't really enter into the actual production costs because
Right.
they are not incurred by the owner of
The company.
by the company.
Yeah, no, that is totally true. However, neoclassical economic theory would argue that consumers are rational, not emotional, and the rationality is what gives items their value. So where I'm like, the customer's irrational and emotional, that's why certain things have values that other things don't. They just feel like better, and there's no reason behind it. The neoclassical school of thinking actually ignores this completely. And what they say is, no, the customers are so rational that the rational approach to spending money and engaging in the economy is what's going to drive all of their economic output.
So people are acting like little mathematicians, accountants at the
Yes.
checkout. Like I did not just buy more expensive bubbly water because I liked the label today.
Exactly. They are just like, no, everybody is super rational, not emotional, and the rationality gives items their value. And yeah, obviously we know this is not accurate. We all do irrational things with money every single day. I have done the most irrational things with money. Like, I actually have an impulse spending problem, so I've done a lot of irrational things with money in my life.
I saw your coffee taste test thing.
Well, I feel like that was rational. I did drink all the coffee, and I needed to figure out a new replacement to the Starbucks coffee anyway because of the Starbucks boycott. So I felt like it was rational for me to buy 4 different tubs of coffee to determine my new one going forward, and I settled on La Colombe. So
Okay.
we got a winner out of it, and nothing went to waste. That totally rational. I think I was thinking more irrational, like I'm 3 drinks in and I'm like, I'm just gonna buy 6 people a drink in this bar right now.
That sounds awesome. That sounds like very rational behavior as someone who is sometimes at the bar with you.
I mean, yeah, you have been the beneficiary of this behavior.
I am telling you that this is very rational and also virtuous behavior.
So, whatever. We know consumers often go off their feelings rather than what's rationally true, hence the cotton thing in my job, for example. But neoclassical economic theory does not acknowledge this. They say, yeah, everybody's kind of like a little robot and they're doing everything super rationally. And also that they're going off of available information and past experiences to help shape their consumer demand. Now, the reason this is important is that capitalists in favor of a free market say that because consumers are so easy to predict the behavior of, they're so rational, you actually don't need a government to intervene with the economy at all because we just always know what's going on.
Like, the economists can basically run the economy, and that's the only thing that matters.
You can just set it on autopilot, actually. You just make one equation that sets up how everything's going to function because all of the consumption is so predictable. You don't need to account for variables like human emotion. You just autopilot that thing, babe, and then cut the government's, economic spending down or out completely and let us do our thing.
Or what, like, social scientists call externalities, for example, environmental catastrophes.
No, those don't exist.
Those don't exist.
No.
The world is entirely predictable.
It's like a Tesla, and it's going to drive itself straight into a car crash. But they don't tell you that last part. They're just like, autopilot. It's so cool.
It can go from New York to Los Angeles all by itself while you watch Harry Potter.
Exactly. So yeah, again, we know economists are really bad at anticipating the market in real life. And this is because, yes, there are a lot of real world factors that influence consumer decisions that are just difficult to anticipate. And humans are just not that rational. And this is because, this school of thought is there to maximize emphasis on corporate profit, which we know leads to wealth inequality. Like, we know that what these guys are trying to do is just come up with all these justifications for doing unchecked super capitalism without government intervention at all.
Where like the shareholders in a company somehow manage to get all the profit every year, even in down years.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And the government doesn't really need to look at what we're doing too much because the economy is handling itself.
Yeah.
So they're like, shush, you don't need to look at what companies are doing. Why are you looking at them? That's a waste of money. You're charging taxpayers money to hire somebody in the government to assess what's going on at these businesses? That's so foolish. You don't need to do that. We all know the market just runs itself. So this is kind of the system in place here.
Capitalism has never been in crisis.
Oh, yeah, definitely not. Definitely not around 1932 either. So whatever, regardless of its downfalls, right, the new Chicago School of Economics is set up and Milton is in. And if you followed what Milton's kind of been learning so far in undergrad, this really goes along with his worldview he's developing, right? And Milton and his colleagues and students from this Chicago School of Economics, like David mentioned, would later be known as the Chicago Boys, because it is a specific set of people who are all practicing this specific type of economic ideology. So, at the University of Chicago, he took, for example, Jacob Weiner's price theory course, which echoed Marshall's ideas about how pricing worked, and he also met his future wife, Rose Director.
Oh. What a beautiful name.
Yeah,
Director.
I don't think she's a good person. From what I can tell. 1933, he graduates with his master's degree from the University of Chicago, and 2 years later, he's living in Washington, D.C., and he is assisting with a consumer budget study for the Natural Resources Committee. So he's kind of really involved in economics on, like, the consumer spending side.
Okay.
He's really interested in how people spend money. 2 years after that, he ends up moving to New York. He gets a new job with the National Bureau of Economic Research. And then he ends up joining this guy, Simon Kuznets, in the study of income and wealth distribution. So Kuznets is kind of interesting because he believes that economic inequality is a curve. Like, think if you took a cup and turned it upside down. And I really think this is important to understand because we see that this thinking will influence Milton later on in life. So what Kuznets says is that as an economy develops, inequality, at first it's going to be really bad. You're going to have a bunch of rich guys and a bunch of poor people. Inequality is going to go through the roof. But then it's going to max out. And then it's just all smooth sailing and it's going to decrease over time.
Does he explain why he believes this?
He does, with a lot of words that don't quite make sense. And everyone's just kind of like, all right.
And is it basically, I feel like it's often been explained to me something like, well, production just means that everything gets cheaper so that everyone's quality of life goes up. And then...
Yes.
And then there's like a
and
dot,
rich
dot,
people
dot.
are just kind of reinvesting into the economy all the time. And it's just going to vibe. It's just going to hit equilibrium and vibe, and you don't have to worry about it so much. So if you see everything falling apart around you right now, it's temporary. Just get through it.
But I feel like the temporary is always one of those things where they're like, temporary on this like world historical scale where it's like, cool, that does shit for me because it's going to be like 50 more years before things get better and I'll be dead.
Right. And
like,
spoiler alert, it just never gets better anyway. Yeah, it's totally.
It's like you just died before you reached the good part.
Yes. So yeah, Kuznets says as an economy develops, this is going to happen, but it's just okay. It'll get worse, but then it'll get better. You know, kind of like when you're cleaning your room and you throw everything into piles everywhere and it looks messier somehow, but it's all just part of the process. Let it happen. So the study that he worked on with this Kuznets guy ultimately found, this is pretty wild, and this gives you some insight into how early on we've got Milton applying everything he's learned together. These two guys, that it's all going to seem bad, but just push through it guy, and then Milton, they determine that actually the American Medical Association, the AMA, they, by having barriers to entry, like getting a license to be a doctor, they actually were hindering the profession of healthcare.
So basically, if I'm understanding this, the American Medical Association is like, if we got rid of that, we wouldn't need universal health insurance because doctors would just be super cheap.
Yeah, because why do we have to issue them licenses?
You know, I went to an unlicensed doctor recently. His name was Moreau.
Was it just like a friend in your... Oh, was it the island of Moreau?
Yeah, so... I had a weird week as a like half dog, but that was...
I like that originally I was like, no, this sounds like something you would do. You would just like find a guy in your building who was like, yeah, I used to be a doctor. I'm not licensed anymore, but I can fix that problem for you.
No, I just don't go to the doctor like a good American.
Yeah, exactly. We don't go to the doctors. Yeah. Yeah, so he was like, really, the AMA is creating a monopoly by licensing physicians, and that's why all the physicians are making so much money because of supply and demand. The supply of physicians is smaller because all of them have to get licensed, and that's a barrier to entry, so we have fewer doctors, and that's why the demand is so high, so the price is so high. So if we wanted cheaper healthcare, we just got to stop licensing doctors and just like let everybody be a doctor.
But I mean, I think that isn't that just misinterpreting what a doctor is? Like a doctor has to have certain training,
qualifications,
and right, and that's because like.
I mean,
it's a skill.
Yeah, anyone could just start performing surgery, I guess.
Like, it's like, oh, I guess, like, I get X-Acto knives from Michael's sometimes to make models and shit.
No, you're a doctor now.
I could just use those as scalpels.
Yeah.
I don't know what an autoclave is, really, honestly. I don't know what sterilization is, but let's do some surgery.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. So it's this whole deregulation will save us all kind of principle. And it was really controversial when it came out, and it is still a pretty weird take to this day. But it does, David, doesn't it sound like something you could hear like a contemporary libertarian saying?
I mean, I feel like the answer to this is always the like, cool, I have a scalpel, let's give you a nose job. Right, like just to like.
Let's just go for it.
Let's do it. Like,
let's get into this.
Like they got like none of these assholes ever put some skin in the game because do you think Milton Friedman is going to an unlicensed doctor?
Oh, absolutely not.
Right,
no.
like.
But theoretically, they'd be like, well, on the open market, word of mouth for the good doctors would just get out, and then he would just like go to the doctors who were good, and that would like dictate which doctors got the most business because they're providing a quality service. That is like what these people would say, and then you think about it for 2 seconds and you're like, this makes no sense. This makes no sense. Yeah, but like what
happens before word of mouth?
Yeah, no,
like,
a bunch of people die.
You hang your shingle on the on the thing, and people are like, so that's the doctor we go to?
Yeah,
and then they die.
And then they die, and that's how you know not to go to that doctor, according to Milton Friedman.
But they're dead, so they can't even write a Google review.
No, but their family will tell you, like, don't go to that one. He killed a bunch of people we know. You want to go to the guy down the road, the guy working out of his garage. That guy. He fixes cars, and he also does surgeries in the same space. He's good, though, I promise.
I mean, I feel like what if they tell you only afterwards? Like, oh, doctor slash mechanic, oh my god, he's so good, and you just got your, like, Kia fixed.
Yeah.
And someone else is like, shit, I was trying to go there for, like, heart surgery.
Yeah. Well, the Kia is, like, the heart of the auto industry. So I think that tracks.
That's
but this really just reminded me of that, like, libertarian who got booed on stage for saying that people should have driver's licenses.
Should or not?
Well, he was, like, doing, like, a libertarian primary debate, and one of the questions the moderator asked a bunch of libertarian candidates was like, do you think there should be driver's licenses? And all these people were like, absolutely not. Nope, let people drive cars. And this one guy was like, well, yeah, I think we should maybe have driver's license. And everybody was like, no, get him out of here. But it just reminds me of this. Like, should we license doctors? And everyone's like, nope, absolutely not. Nope. So all of this is going fine and dandy. Milton is finding his home in economics, right? With a bunch of other real freaks, real weirdos, man.
People who have never met a real world experience.
In their life. Yeah, exactly. But then 1939 comes around. 1939 to 1945, we got World War II. And this kind of shakes things up. So Friedman starts working in the Department of Treasury in the Division of Tax Research, and then he works for the Statistical Research Group at Columbia University, where he's a member of a team that's applying statistical analysis to war research. He also does a little bit of teaching, but, you know, it's like a weird, unstable time. He teaches for a year at the University of Wisconsin, and he teaches for a year at the University of Minnesota. It's not until the war is over, 1946, that he's able to complete his PhD at Columbia.
Oh, very fancy.
Very fancy.
He's moving up in the world.
And then he accepts a position in the economics department teaching at University of Chicago. And this is where he would work for the next 30 years, teaching economics, specializing in price theory and monetary policies. So this is really where his career takes off. 1947. And this is where we get into the weird, not secret society that he's a part of.
It's just they gave it a goofy name to make it seem.
It's so goofy. I think it's good branding, though.
Yeah, I mean, if you want your club of, like, little assholes to sound spooky and important, you give it a name like this.
You give it a name like that. So Milton attends the opening meeting of the Mont Pelerin Society.
I want to join them. Actually, I don't want to join them.
The Mont Pelerin Society. I think you should say it like that.
I'm not going to.
Mont Pelerin Society. So it's an organization founded by someone you mentioned earlier, Hayek.
Yeah.
Another economist.
He wrote The Road to Serfdom. He's like the arch libertarian economics guy. Like that, like, government overreach is going to, like, plunge us all into a neo-feudal bullshit thing.
Yes. And so this guy starts a society that is then dedicated to the study and preservation of what they call free societies. And what do you think they're free of, David?
Regulation.
Government regulation. Things like making your doctor have a license to perform heart surgery on you, for example. So this is a neoliberal international organization that's out here advocating free market economic policies, and they are trying to discover ways that the private sector can just totally replace the role of the government.
Interestingly, I will say, this is an aside, Hayek had, like, this, like, weird trajectory with the European Union and with the European Common Market, where at first he was like, this is some bullshit, fuck this, because giant
big government,
super government.
Yeah.
But then he realized that he was like, oh, it will just be like such a conglomeration of small governments working together that it will be entirely ineffectual and basically create the free market from the back door.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So, this whole group is pretty major. It's also major that their, like, stated purpose is to replace the role of the government with the private sector, like with individual businesses, because everything you hate about Reagan, like, this is the shit we're really talking about here. And the whole idea is, why have the government do anything? Like, for example, provide healthcare when a private company can do it and make a profit off people in the process. They also said freedom was associated with private property in the competitive market. So that was their definition of what it means to be free.
A definition respected by any philosopher of note.
Also,
John Locke, eat your heart out.
Yeah, this is freedom. And remember, people listening at home, private property isn't like the house you live in. Mm-hmm. No, it's, you know, things like owning an apartment complex and, you know, taking people's rent every month, or owning companies and then extracting profit from the work of your employees to make yourself rich at their expense.
And this is just always a thing about, like, whose freedom. That's always the question, because
Yes.
I don't own private. I mean, on the scale that they're talking about, I do not own private property.
Well, I mean, you don't own any private property.
Yeah.
You own personal property.
I do own personal property.
What is your personal... You don't even own your apartment. I don't know what personal... Your clothes?
I guess that's...
Some books?
I do own clothes and books. I own a bed.
You got a bed. That's pretty good. That's a high-ticket item.
I have a couch that
You've
was
got a
free.
couch.
Someone left it outside my door.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Cool. It's a good couch. The sectional?
Yeah, it's nice.
It's good. It's really good. Yeah, so we often see in neoliberal economic circles, this idea of freedom takes on a different meaning than how most of us would think about it. And what these guys really mean is the freedom for some rich dudes to do whatever they want to the rest of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, it seems like there are metaphysical definitions of freedom. There are political definitions of freedom. This doesn't pass muster with any of them.
No,
right?
But it has a huge impact on our lives. And when we hear people talk about freedom, an interesting question to ask is always, freedom for who to do what?
Yeah.
And you really will see people try to justify this in lots of weird ways. I think a lot of people want the freedom to do whatever, but they want, when push comes to shove, a lot of them want protection from people doing whatever to them.
And one of the other things that I often at least think of is really important to consider is what kind of conception of individual it underwrites that conception of freedom, right? Like how individuals relate to the community, how they relate to action. What is going to count as a choice at all. Yeah,
this is just really, we could get into the philosophy of what it means to be free.
Yeah.
But really we can just talk about what these guys are, how they're interpreting freedom is probably going to be the shortest way for us to understand it, because we all probably have different understandings of what freedom is. But they really are thinking about, the freedom for private enterprise, private business to flourish. So we see Friedman, Milton is heavily influenced by this idea that the free market, which will have limited or no government restrictions, businesses will just be in control of everything, is somehow going to save the world. And this becomes his guiding economic policy. And he's working as a professor, teaching other people this guiding economic policy, again, as though it is truth with a capital T. We're going to let the businesses do whatever we want. We're not going to restrict them at all. And, this is exactly why you can never separate economics from politics. You just can't. Capitalism, right, is an economic and political system hand in hand, and the guys in charge know that. They know business and politics go hand in hand. So it's not this conspiracy theory. It's just the reality of what it means to live under capitalism. The businesses are doing deals with the government all day long because it's the same system. It's one and the same system. So Milton would later say that his participation in this meeting at the Mont Pelerin Society, marked the beginning of my active involvement in the political process. That's what he says of this. So that political process, spoiler alert, yes, involves advising some of America's favorite villains, Richard Nixon, like we said, and Ronald Reagan, on economic policy during their presidency. So 1948. He becomes a full professor at University of Chicago, and his view of economics is pretty solidified at this point. Some of his key beliefs include support of a flexible exchange rate, support of a monetary growth rule. This would be like the Fed is required to target the growth rate of money to equal the growth rate of real GDP to leave price levels unchanged. So this basically says if inflation goes up 2 to 4% every year, we should grow the money supply to match 3 to 5%. He also supports school vouchers, which is the process of diverting money from public schools to help subsidize the tuition of private schools and religious schools instead. Again, just really take things away from the government and give them to independent businesses.
And also, okay, can we put a pin in this and just talk about school vouchers for 1 minute?
Yeah.
Because the thing about charter schools, whatever, private schools, right, is that they do not have as an imperative the need to teach everybody, right? They consult, which means that there are going to be some students who are just fully left behind, who do not have an education.
And also the nature of what they're teaching, because there's less government regulation involved, you can teach people things that are completely not true. You can skip entire topics. It is just, it's the wild west in education.
Don't get me started on some of the shit I learned at Fresno Christian.
Oh yeah, you went to a religious school, exactly.
But I think like the real principle, even if you were to say like the free market made all the schools equally good because people were competing with one another or some shit, like because it is not like they are not mandated to teach all students. Right. Some students will necessarily be left behind. Like that's just like fundamentally baked into the privatization of education. So if someone comes at you about charter schools or some shit, that's like, it's just there.
Right.
Yeah.
So he, though, is like, why would we have public education? Just make the private schools and the religious schools do everything. And that's what that school voucher thing is. He also supported a balanced budget amendment, which would basically mean the government shouldn't go into debt with its spending. And this is interesting. We did an episode once about modern monetary theory. And modern monetary theory, for anybody who didn't listen to that episode, it says the opposite. It says that going into debt is irrelevant for most countries. Japan is often cited as an example, showing it doesn't really matter if countries go into debt. Like Japan, for example, did a lot of deficit spending, went into a lot of debt, and everyone was like, oh, this is going to lead to insolvency, high interest rates, inflation, and they actually had negative inflation for a while.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, this didn't affect them at all. But Milton believes the opposite of this. He's like, a country's budget must be balanced. For the record, also here in the United States, do you remember Bill Clinton balanced the budget?
Somewhat famously by cutting spending on social programs.
Right, and the budget actually had surpluses at the end of the year. We had extra money left over, and that is thought to have really damaged the economy on the whole in the United States because the government wasn't spending to stimulate the economy. So Milton's obsession with the balanced budget, again, that's another thing that everybody's like, this actually is a weird thing to be obsessed with. The government should just spend as much money as it needs to. He also was opposed to price controls, and this would include, yes, you guessed it, opposing minimum wage and rent control.
Big Costa Hawkins fan.
Get rid of those. And then weirdly, he was also for the decriminalization of recreational drugs and against military drafts.
I mean, that...
What's it sound like to you?
I mean, libertarianism. It's also,
Perfect.
I mean, it's like the California ideology thing. It's like your tech bro.
Yeah,
right?
it's a Republican who wants to smoke weed.
I love weed and school vouchers.
Yeah, I love weed and sending my kid to a private school. These are really important things to me.
I mean, I think they all kind of in a weird way, they all imagine these gated communities that do, ironically for Hayek, start to sound quite feudal.
Yeah,
right?
That's true, actually. Yeah. Yeah, and of course, the libertarian thing is a very broken clock that's right twice a day when it comes to foreign policy. Usually, libertarians are against, yes, just endless military growth in regards to foreign wars. But it's interesting that he has this position because later we see that his involvement in Chile, in particular, involved a lot of government spending on a foreign covert war.
Yeah, but it was to deregulate and privatize.
Right, that's the only way Milton's okay with military spending.
He's like, look, we're doing a bad thing for a good end. Death camps. Death camps.
So Milton himself said he was a small L libertarian.
Okay. Do you think he ever felt like he graduated
to big L,
to the big L,
to the big
he went
L
from
loser
Milt to Milton?
Yeah, I don't know what he would say. I know though he did upset later on a bunch of Republicans by writing an open letter to this international drug lord, drug czar, and being like,
wait, I'm sorry, drug lord or drug czar? What are we talking? Is this government guy who's regulating drugs, or is
now
this guy...
I'm not remembering it's some drug guy?
Because I feel like if you tell me someone is the drug czar, I'm like, oh, they work for the DEA.
No, that's right. I can't remember. I feel like he must have been a drug czar because the open letter, he was like, let's just decriminalize all of this.
Right.
And it wouldn't make sense if he wrote to a drug lord.
He was like, hey, El Chapo.
Do you want to go in business? That makes a lot of sense. So it must have been a drug czar. It was this is just a weird aside I read. He's writing letters to drug people about how everyone should do drugs. Basically is what's going on here. Anyway, 1953, within the college, this kind of new economic school that they're building at the University of Chicago, he ends up establishing the Money and Banking Workshop. And this thing turned into this major thing. It's a forum for faculty members, graduate students who are working on their dissertations, and sometimes outside visitors to come talk money, to come talk about the economy. And the workshop gets renowned. They're having papers put out in like major economic journals talking about theories. Everybody is like, this is like the place to be if you're an economist. It was a huge deal. So 1956, he ends up writing an introduction for something called Studies in the Quantity of Money. And this is a collection of articles that had been contributed by participants in that money and banking workshop. Here, he really stakes his case against Keynesian economics. So we talked about Keynes earlier. Yeah, he's the guy who's like, maybe we do a little tiny government regulation so the economy doesn't collapse.
Also,
I don't know.
like maybe go into debt to spend money during bad times.
Yes.
Right?
So when you think about like the FDR New Deal, like government spending.
Or like the WPA program.
Yes.
Any of that shit.
Keynes is like, a little bit of this will help the United States not completely collapse and go full-blown commie mode. Right. So he believed, that the government should intervene and help regulate the economy. Otherwise, it'll collapse. And Keynes is like, this is going to, if we just keep going this free market route, it's really going to leave the USA open and vulnerable. And he's like, money supply doesn't really matter. What really matters is how we regulate the money we have. And Milton does not agree. And here he starts talking about something that really he gets like well known for throughout his life, where he's like, no. The money supply, how much money we got circulating in the economy, that is really important. And that's going to affect real economic activity in the short run and price levels in the long run. So this is where he's really flushing out like his contribution uniquely to economics. So in 1957, the next year, a theory of the consumption function comes out. This is something he wrote, and this talks about this thing called the permanent income hypothesis. So this idea is that, remember how he was doing all that stuff about like just how consumers spend money, how people spend money?
They're rational.
Yeah,
Always.
They're rational. He says that a household's consumption and savings decisions will be more affected by changes in what people perceive to be permanent income shifts than things that people think are temporary. Which is kind of like, duh.
Like, oh, I have less money coming in this week, but I know I'm going to have money coming in next week.
So I'm just going to spend like normal. A good example of this is like, say your job is like, hey, we're cutting your hours this week, right? Yeah. You're not going to react to the same as if your job is like, hey, we're firing you.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, again, common sense.
If you're getting fired, you're buying the 24-pack brick of beer.
Right? I don't know if this is real or not, but it's that idea that what like in times of economic downturn, bars always make money.
That sounds right.
It sounds right. So the reason this matters, though, even though it just sounds like common sense to us, is because it affects consumer habits in regards to how they're taxed. Mm-hmm. So consumer spending is obviously the backbone of the American economy under capitalism. Basically, we just like need people to keep buying shit to keep businesses afloat so people have jobs and the rich people who own the businesses can keep getting richer. If people stop buying things, revenue slows, businesses shrink or go bankrupt. So how much money we as consumers spend under capitalism on things like iced lattes and even, yes, avocado toast, it's actually super important. And this is why most conversations about personal accountability, for example, when it comes to household finances, are super hypocritical, because economists are going to tell you to do less consumer spending if you want to survive on the subpar wages your boss is giving you, like buy less avocado toast.
Then they're also going to be like, oh my God, nobody's buying the fucking avocado toast. The economy's going to crash.
Millennials killed the avocado toast industry. Exactly. They know in their hearts they need you buying avocado toast or everything's going to fall apart. So what does this mean for the theory of household consumption in regards to a temporary or permanent change in income? Well, if you raise taxes, for example, if people think it's just temporary, they're going to maintain the same consumer spending habits and they'll just pay for their taxes out of any savings they have. So they'll be, oh, okay, it's temporary. I'll keep buying my avocado toast, living my life. And if I get a higher tax bill, it's a bummer, but it'll just come from my savings. But if they think the taxes that a government is issuing are a permanent change, they will stop buying avocado toast, basically.
And this is always assuming that they have savings.
This is always, yeah. Real short-sighted. So this means that there is incentives then for a government to market permanent tax policy changes as temporary. Mm-hmm. And this is actually pretty major. So in 1959, 2 years after this, Milton writes something else that comes out, a program for monetary stability. And this introduces his theory of monetarism, which is the crowning jewel of his accomplishments as an economist, apparently. I don't know. Spoiler alert, it gets debunked. Everything gets debunked. So this is Milton's idea that most of the economy, can be controlled by deciding just how much money should exist. Remember, it goes back to that intro he wrote where he was like, Keynes is so wrong about everything. Oh my God, he doesn't even know that how much money exists in society is the most important thing. So here he really flushes this out in this whole book. And he calls this thinking monetarism. This is considered a major revelation in economics, and all of these free market enthusiasts get really eager to implement this idea that if you want to control the economy, you don't need all these silly things like interest rates or government regulation or deficit spending or, pulling people out of the recession with government jobs. No. All you need to do is just control how much money you're introducing or not introducing.
So you just print or burn money as needed.
Exactly.
That's the point.
And again, this goes along with that idea where it's like, we're just putting it on autopilot mode, one elegant equation for how much money you need or don't need based on what's happening in the economy. And then we don't need all these people in these pesky government jobs trying to control the economy. It'll just do its own thing. So these ideas kind of work together. So 1962, he's doing really well. He gets named the Paul Snowden Russell Distinguished Service Professor of Economics. Real great title, real catchy title. And his book, Capitalism and Freedom, comes out.
That sounds so sick.
I know. The name is really... It's something.
I am a red-blooded American man.
I said that the only way it could be more American as a title is if it was called Hamburger Equal Jesus Christ Flag.
That also sounds sick to me. I want to read that. Yeah.
Would you read that book? Yes.
Hell yeah.
Let's go.
Wait, no monster trucks?
Oh, we could add that.
Okay.
Yeah. What if it was called Capitalism and Freedom and Monster Trucks?
That's a fucking bestseller.
Reissue. Yeah.
More popular than the Bible.
That's going to be my next book, actually.
Okay.
I love
so you're shifting from like socialist Maddie to like...
No, I'm all about monster trucks, capitalism, and freedom now. Sorry. I'm doing the Milton school. I mean, this guy got rich. So,
yeah.
I'm doing everything wrong, I guess. So this book was more like pop economics. It was targeted more towards a general audience, and it really glorified the free market in a major way. Like, in a lot of ways, it was just free market propaganda. It argued for having a volunteer army instead of just like having the government spend money on an army.
So mercenaries.
Yeah, mercenaries, you got it. Freely floating exchange rates, an abolition, yes, of licensing doctors. He comes back to that. He's like, get those doctors' licenses out of there.
Do you think he like had like a cousin or something who just like failed his medical exams and he was like, oh shit, we gotta let this guy in, man?
I think more than that, it was probably that he knew a doctor and he was like, who's this guy think he is? He thinks he's so special with his license?
Do you think that some guy at a party was like, Dr. Milton Friedman with your PhD in economics, air quotes, whatever, I'm a real doctor, and it just stuck with him?
I think that, yes. I think that's the one. That has to be it, yeah. He also advocated for a negative income tax, which I'm sure only applied to the wealthy. I haven't read Capitalism and Freedom, but...
Wait, what, is it... Did he accidentally do, like
UBI? Yeah, but for rich people. Rich people get UBI. And then again, the education vouchers. Don't have the pesky public schools. Just send your kids to privately owned schools. And basically, in this book also, he's like, you love freedom, Americans, right? We all love freedom. Guess what? Capitalism is the only way anybody can ever be free. And honestly, this is the greatest trick anyone ever pulled, in my opinion. Just like convincing Americans that going to work so your boss can get rich off of your labor, and if you quit, you'll just die, that is somehow freedom.
Well, you have the freedom to go get another job.
Right. For someone so much different who's going to pay you so much more money.
Yeah.
Yeah, which obviously does not exist. But yeah, he tells all these people, he's like, freedom can only be achieved through a free market.
Because we're just at like the part of the income inequality curve where we're all going to be in like, egalitarian utopia, right?
It's coming any minute. You just gotta wait for it. You just gotta wait for it. So the year after this, he publishes something else. He's doing a lot of writing. He publishes The Relative Stability of Monetary Velocity and the Investment Multiplier in the United States, 1897 to 1958.
Real catchy title.
Yes, he's really good. Again, poets. He co-authored this with David Meiselman, and this book just really was railing against Keynesian economics. He really hated Keynes. He was like, ugh. He also published the first of 3 books, which he would write with Anna J. Schwartz. The first one was A Monetary History of the United States from 1867 to 1960. He's really in his years era here with his writing. And this combined theoretical and empirical analysis with what people called institutional insights, aka his opinions.
So, by his opinions as someone who, like, did the war stuff with the government.
He did do the war stuff with the government. This is his account of the role of money also in the U.S. economy since the Civil War. But it was just his opinions about kind of everything. Like, for example, he was like, the Great Depression wouldn't have been that bad if the Federal Reserve hadn't, like, made some mistakes. It sounds benign, but what he's really saying is that economic collapse is not inevitable in free market capitalism. We just have to do free market capitalism harder and freer to avoid it. So it actually is more like, insidious than it sounds.
Well, I mean, it's right, like, anyone who is any sort of Marxist or who just knows anything about history is like, well, capitalism just, like, by its very nature produces crises.
Yes.
Right.
And he's like, no, that's because you weren't capitalisming hard enough.
Yeah.
You need to do super capitalism.
And we all know that there is fundamentally no such thing as pure capitalism. That doesn't exist. That's a fiction.
Right.
Yeah.
But he's like, no, it does exist and you need to work towards it, the way to work towards it is by getting unlicensed open heart surgery, obviously, or whatever. So he also said in the 1930s that the thing we should have just done is just bailed out banks. So this is like a precursor to the approach that the government, would later take during the Great Recession in 2008 when they bailed out major banks but not average consumers. And the effects of this obviously did not help the economy overall. It just led to huge jumps in wealth inequality over the subsequent years.
Didn't all of those banks record, like, record profits that year and do, like, a bunch of stock buybacks?
Yes, they did. And another thing that they did is they funded new mortgages and loans for private companies to buy foreclosed on homes. And this is what led to private companies buying, like, even single family homes and creating a massive housing shortage, which has been still to this day contributing to the United States becoming a nation of renters. And we all know the only way to achieve any sort of economic stability if you're not a rich person in the United States, for years economists have been saying, it's to own your own home. Yeah. So basically, by bailing out banks and giving banks more money, we actually see, because he was like, this is what we should have done during the Great Depression. Okay, well, we did it during the Great Recession, and the effect was that it exacerbated wealth inequality and created a lot of what we're dealing with now, a really unstable market. Ironically, we're going to talk about Chile soon, but, you know, a market with so much, like, inequality between the wealthy and the average consumer that the only other country for a long time that was on par with us was Chile.
That makes sense.
Which makes a lot of sense. We're going to get into why. In 1966, he also started writing this regular column for Newsweek magazine, which he would do until 1984. So an important thing to note here is that Milton Friedman's ideas are really getting implemented at this, like, government level. Like, he's working with, like, government kind of programs, but also he's reaching just the average person. Like, he's reaching your uncle with a Newsweek subscription. Mm-hmm. And this, I think, is really responsible for how a lot of contemporary conservatives view the economy and think about the economy, and why a lot of people think that there are, like, capital T truths about how the economy works, just like your average layperson at home, and why you hear just average Republicans, like my mother's father, for example, talking about how important a balanced budget is.
At a government level, but also I'm assuming at a personal
Just
level.
At a personal level,
yeah.
No. But, I mean, yes, but, like, no, they're talking about at the government level. Yeah, they're like, well, the federal government needs to balance that budget. Like, that's something you hear conservatives say even to this day.
Who all love Bill Clinton.
No, they don't love Bill Clinton, but they will now be like, well, say what you will about Bill Clinton, but he balanced that budget, you know? But no, and it's really the role of this guy. He was in average Americans' homes with Newsweek magazine telling them how he thought the economy should work as though it weren't an opinion, it was truth. And people believed it. His articles would alternate with those presenting more liberal views on economic matters by people like Paul Samuelson or Lester Thoreau. But yeah, every other week, his columns would come out. Or month, or whatever the publication was for Newsweek. Week, right? It's in the title. Newsweek. It's got to be weekly.
So he's writing 2 columns a month on average?
Right.
Yeah.
So the following year, after he gets the sweet Newsweek gig, he gives an address. At this point, he is the president of the American Economic Association. And what does he do in his presidential address? Uses it as an excuse to just rail against Keynes again. He's just really...
I will say,
can't get over it.
Keynes did kill Milton Friedman's dog. So,
Oh, wow, I did not read that. I missed that.
Yeah.
In all the research, it would make sense. So the thing he really goes all in on this time is this thing called the Phillips curve. Now, it's worth noting the Phillips curve did kind of turn out to be shit, yeah. And it said that a trade-off exists between wage inflation and unemployment. So the Phillips curve said when unemployment is low, companies will raise wages because workers wouldn't be so desperate that they take any old pay, right?
So this is supply and demand applied to jobs.
The supply and demand in the job market. But then what you got is all these workers who are getting paid better, and it's going to create inflation.
Yeah.
All right, so this is the theory. Friedman, though, Milton, is like, this is not true because workers are going to think that their wages are higher only temporarily, but because they're rational, then they'll go out into the world, they'll see the cost of everything got higher, and they'll be like, oh, I actually don't have more spending power overall. Then inflation's going to stagnate because people will stop shopping all willy-nilly, and the prices will come down. Because remember, he's really into supply and demand. So he's like, the demand will go down because people are like, I don't really need this. I don't actually have as much money as I thought. Now, the interesting thing about this is that, yeah, the Phillips curve was debunked, but not for the reason Milton said. It was debunked because it didn't take into account the decline of collective bargaining and labor unions in the United States.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. They're like, no, this is actually what contributes to workers' wages. But whatever, he's really just hating Keynes. So 1970, Friedman writes an article for the New York Times, which is called A Friedman Doctrine. The social responsibility of business is to increase its profits.
For shareholders.
Yeah. So
Yes.
around this time, what we have, the 60s, right? We've really got people starting to question the social responsibility of companies for the first time. We've got, maybe not the first time, but in a major way. We're having the hippie revolution, we're having counterculture movements, and people are starting to question kind of the role of big business in the United States. What's going on behind closed doors with our Congress people and these businessmen? Like, what is the social responsibility of a business? And Milton Friedman is like, none. There's no social, what are you talking about? You stupid hippies, go get a job, basically. So what he says is, in a free enterprise private property system, a corporate executive is an employee of the owners of the business. He has a direct responsibility to his employers. That responsibility is to conduct the business in accordance with their desires, which generally will be to make as much money as possible while conforming to the basic rules of society. He then asks, what does it mean to say that the corporate executive has a social responsibility in his capacity as a businessman? And he answers his own question, and it's really telling. He says, if this statement is not pure rhetoric, it must mean that he is to act in some way that is not in the interest of his employers. For example, that he is to refrain from increasing the price of the product in order to contribute to the social objective of preventing inflation, even though a price increase would be in the best interest of the corporation. Or that he has to make expenditures on reducing pollution beyond the amount that is in the best interest of the corporation, or that is required by law in order to contribute to the social objective of improving the environment. Or that at the expense of corporate profits, he is to hire hardcore unemployed people instead of better qualified available workmen to contribute to the social objective of reducing poverty.
Pause. Hardcore unemployed people.
Yeah, he put it in air quotes too. He did a quotes. He's like, these hardcore unemployeds. You're like, what?
Not the soft unemployed.
No.
X's on their hands, floor punches.
Yeah.
Those unemployed.
Yeah. The hardcore unemployed. In each of these cases, the corporate executive would be spending someone else's money for a general social interest. Insofar as his actions in accord with his social responsibility reduce returns to stockholders, he is spending their money. Insofar as his actions raise the price to consumers, he is spending the consumer's money. Insofar as his actions lower the wages of some employees, he is spending their money. And whether he wants to or not, can he get away with spending his stockholders, customers, or employees' money? Will not the stockholders fire him? And really, this is just hammering home that idea that if you're broke, it's not your boss's fault. They're just doing what they're supposed to do. It's that other guy's fault over there.
Okay. You were talking about hippies and social responsibility of businesses or whatever.
Yeah.
I think I agree with Milton Friedman that that's bullshit. Because I don't think businesses are people. Right, they're not the bearer of moral values in a capitalist economy. And being like, oh, I wish that my tire manufacturer bought trees or whatever, did a green offset things or whatever. I don't think that's That's nothing.
It really is a distraction from the main issue, which is that, like, capitalism is killing us all.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree with this. And this is kind of like this is what we think of as being like that kind of like virtue signaling thing within business.
Yeah.
You're like, the business is evil.
Yeah.
They are evil.
I don't give a shit what they do to make it seem nice. It's evil by virtue of it existing.
Right. There are some things that I'm like, that I care about. Like, it's like, oh, all right, well, if the business is paying their workers more than they legally have to, I care about that because that has material, tangible effects for workers.
Right, like, I understand all
But I'm still going to think they're evil, but I would still prefer to shop with the evil company that pays its workers a little better than the evil company that doesn't.
Yeah, I just would rather the workers owned the company.
Right, exactly. You'd rather the workers own the means of production. Yeah, totally. So, yeah, I get what he's saying, but he's not doing it as a scathing critique of capitalism to be like, this is what's wrong with capitalism, boys and girls. The businesses have no incentive to do good. They're here to destroy the planet and get rich. No, he's just like, this is what's so great about capitalism. The businesses do whatever they want and it makes sense to you, you loser.
Yeah, no, I understand that he's trying to, like, sugar a poisoned pill.
Yes, totally. So Friedman concludes that the idea of social responsibility when applied to a business is, quote, a fundamentally subversive doctrine in a free society, and has said that in such a society, there is one and only one social responsibility of business: to use its resources and engage in activities designed to increase its profits so long as it stays within the rules of the game, which is to say, engages in open and free competition without deception or fraud. That's where he draws the line. So, next, what we're going to do here is take a little break from the timeline of Milton Friedman's life, and we are going to get into the whole Chile thing.
The whole Chile thing.
Yeah. And this is important. We're in 1970 in his life, but we're going to just take a minute to do some backstory on while Milton Friedman has been going through his life here, what's been happening in Chile around the same kind of time.
Chile's Allende, right? No.
Allende, yeah,
Allende.
it is.
Okay, so Allende is a moderate social reformer.
Yeah, but let's start even further back. I think we got to start with the Cold War.
Oh, we're not even in Chile.
No. So 1947, the Cold War starts, and the USA is officially embarking, yes, on this ideological battle, I guess I would say, with the USSR. It's capitalism versus communism on this global level.
Realistically, it seems like the Cold War started, like, it just all... World War II was an interlude.
That's, I think, really fair. It probably started with the revolution in Russia.
Yeah, like, if I recall correctly, the United States and England provided resources during the Civil War that followed the revolution to the White Army or whatever.
Yeah. So the Cold War, though, do you want to give a brief explanation? Do you want a little overcap?
Basically, it threatened U.S. like economic and political hegemony for there to be this giant beacon of socialism out in the world.
The USSR.
The USSR. And as a consequence of which, after World War II, the USSR and the United States and Western capitalist countries more broadly engaged in a lot of actual hot conflicts as proxy wars, but never fought each other directly.
Yes, so the USSR and the United States were like, look, we both got nukes, we're both superpowers. If we go to war, the whole planet's going to explode. So instead, they did a lot of non-militarized action against each other. We're talking spy. We're talking, like, propaganda.
Missiles and Turkey.
Yeah, and then also on top of that, we funded heavily wars happening other places.
Yeah.
Against, like, each other's allies.
So, like, if you happen to live in a recently decolonized country, you probably experienced the Cold War as very, very hot.
Yes, exactly. But it was only cold in the United States and the USSR because the fighting never happened here.
Yeah.
So, to help fight the Cold War, the USA established the CIA, September 18th, 1947. It came from this older thing called the OSS, which was part of, like, World War II intelligence efforts. But the CIA itself was founded, yes, with the main primary goal of fighting communism around the world. So a theory in the United States was this thing called the domino theory. David, do you want to explain that?
If one country in an area goes communist, all the countries around them will fall like dominoes.
Yes, and everybody's going to be a communist. So, because of this, the United States is like, that will be so bad for business because we won't be able to have our private businesses go there and make a lot of money because they're all going to be like owned by the states and the money's just going to stay in the country and be like reinvested back in the people. Like, ugh. So they're like, we cannot let a single other country become communist because it's just going to create this domino effect. So the goal of the CIA then is to covertly ensure by any means necessary no other country on the planet becomes socialist or communist.
So they're doing coups. They're training death squads.
They're doing massive propaganda campaigns. They're sending spies, undercover police. They're doing everything in their power. So anything you've ever heard about the CIA, this is the CIA's one goal: stop communism. Meanwhile, while all this is going on, 1959, Castro, successful revolution in Cuba.
Hell yeah.
So the United States freaks out, terrified. They're like, oh my God, all of South America is going to go commie. It's right in our backyard. This is a bad look.
What if communism gets tracked in the back door?
All over the floors, and you just mopped.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So 1964, Chile has an election, and this guy, Salvador Allende, who is a Marxist and a member of Chile's Socialist Party, he had run for president actually a few times before, but not really picked up steam. But in 1964, he's really getting his name out there as a contender. And the United States is like, no, bad. So Allende was promising that if elected, he was going to nationalize the mostly U.S.-owned copper companies.
Yeah, it seemed like my understanding of Allende is that what he actually did in his brief time was like propose pretty moderate land reforms and nationalizing businesses where it made sense. Like he wasn't going full.
He was not that extreme in what he was proposing. No, that is true. He was definitely a socialist, but it's not like he was like change everything overnight. You know, it was.
Yeah, this wasn't like 1917 Lenin shit. This was
a guy who was running to get democratically elected to do, moderate reforms to help improve the Chilean economy by putting things back in the hands of Chilean workers, the Chilean government, and taking it from these few private companies who were really exploiting Chile at the time.
Yeah.
So the United States is like, this cannot happen. We like our businesses that own those copper companies there, and we want to keep extracting profit from them. So the CIA then spends huge amounts of money on anti-communist propaganda to try to encourage voters to elect Allende's capitalist opponent in Chile instead. And it works. Allende loses. This propaganda is super effective. But in 1970, Allende ran again. And at this point, Nixon was president. Henry Kissinger was his assistant for national security affairs. And if you want to hear more about Kissinger, listen to our episode number 95. And Milton Friedman is their economic advisor on a lot of things. And they are all terrified of Allende winning at this point. So again, the United States spends hundreds of thousands of dollars creating anti-communist propaganda in Chile to prevent Allende from being elected. International businesses even join in on this, knowing that Allende would be so bad for business because he would center Chilean needs over foreign business interests. September rolls around though, and very narrowly, Allende wins.
And this is, so he had been like exiled for a bit, right?
At this point, I had not heard of him being exiled, but I did know there was some back and forth over whether he won or not. Oh,
that's right, yeah.
Yeah, they were like trying to figure it out because the margins were so narrow, and everybody was like, he won. So he promises Chile a democratic and legal path to socialism, and he had won with a little over a third of the vote. So kind of one of those things where it's not the popular vote, they have more than two candidates there, but he won. He had the majority vote still. And he said this would be Chilean-style socialism with, quote, red wine and empanadas. So he was a fun guy. Now, it's important to note that, Chile up until this point had been run by basically a monopoly of foreign-based multinational corporations. Like in 1966, just 284 different businesses controlled every division of the Chilean economy. In the industrial sector, it was only 144 businesses that completely controlled everything. And in turn, within each of those 144 manufacturing businesses, there were just a few shareholders who controlled the management of everything. So in more than half of the manufacturing businesses controlling Chile, the 10 largest shareholders owned between 90 and 100% of the capital. So we're really talking about just like, when we talk about like 12 rich dudes getting rich.
Right, so like Chile
10 rich dudes getting rich here.
Chile is basically saying 10 rich dudes are getting rich here and they don't even fucking live here.
Right, they don't even go here. Get rid of them.
Yeah.
We're just gonna hurt these 10 rich dudes, basically. So Chile had been, really being controlled by big foreign business. And having a socialist in charge who would want to make those private businesses publicly owned by Chile instead, spells trouble for capital. So you can see why Nixon then instructed top U.S. officials to do whatever they could to make sure Allende did not take office. So the CIA continues their propaganda. And the CIA also starts meeting with Chilean military contacts in a direct effort to kind of just get the seeds going for a coup to stop the Allende presidency. One general who actually opposed the United States intervening in the democratic process in Chile was then kidnapped and killed, which we can't prove happened because of the CIA, but, it seems a little convenient for my taste. So on November 3rd, all of this fails and Allende is sworn in. From 1970 to 1973, the United States continues their plotting, and they end up spending $8 million on covert actions in Chile, trying to destabilize democracy there. After Allende was sworn in, the U.S. tried to make it nearly impossible for him to govern. There was, for example, an invisible blockade. The CIA also paid the most important trucker union in Chile to just go on strike. Their export credits from the United States were cut off. And then suddenly, food shortages start, right? Things can't get in.
Wait, so you're saying that the CIA funded strike pay for Teamsters?
Yeah.
Is that, I think that's what I'm hearing.
No, you're right. They did. And it was smart to do it because basic necessities could not get into Chile because of all of the CIA intervention. Meanwhile, Chile was also cut off from international monetary aid and assistance, which meant that their only option was to turn to the World Bank. The World Bank then gave them stifling loans when they were economically struggling as a part of all of the CIA interference. And the U.S. then poured massive amounts of money into the militant pro-coup opposition within the Chilean military. There was also El Mercurio, which was this huge Santiago daily newspaper. They were given $1.5 million from the CIA to produce propaganda. So by the time 1973 comes around, all of the pieces are set up for this coup to take place. The economy in Chile is getting really bad under Allende, and the average Chilean doesn't understand it's because the CIA has been doing this to their country, right? They just see the effects like, oh my God, the economy is getting bad. Even people within the military who hadn't been too keen on the coup are like, well, everything is getting so chaotic. The only option looks like a military coup, so we have to join in. Everything is falling apart. September 11th, 1973, the military, launches a coup and takes control of the country. Military jets bomb the presidential palace, and Allende ends up giving this final defiant address to the country, being like, the United States has done this to me, basically, and he kills himself. Fun fact, with a gun that was given to him by Fidel Castro as a gift.
That's dark.
It is dark. His government officials were then taken to an island concentration camp in the Antarctic South where food was mixed in with pebbles so they broke their teeth and other horrifying treatment, obviously. So what follows is really, really bad. It's really, really bleak. As always, I'm not going to be gratuitous with the violence that occurred, but I will just be saying what happened, so we'll move past it quickly, but it's horrifying. General Augusto Pinochet, the army chief who was super sympathetic to U.S. interests in the region, then became dictator of Chile. The very next day, a 189-page economic program called The Brick, because of how big it was laid out on the desk of every new government member in Pinochet's government in Chile. And The Brick was created in part by the CIA. So it called for trade liberalization, tariff reductions, widespread privatization, including of Social Security, and a regressive value-added tax. Pinochet's military then began a ruthless campaign of murdering communists and socialists anywhere they could find them. Universities were shut down, political opponents were arrested, people were tortured and killed in makeshift detention centers across Chile, including in the National Stadium. Victims included everyone from teachers to students to popular musicians even. Survivors described morgues being filled to the brim and bodies found floating down the river. People fled Chile, anybody who could get away. And in the 17 years that Pinochet's dictatorship persisted, thousands were killed and nearly 250,000 Chileans ended up living in exile. It was bad. It was really, really, really horrifying. The United States, though, was pleased. This was their work. This is what they're doing. And Kissinger began to create the policy in Chile for Pinochet to execute. American exiles Chilean exiles, rather, living in the United States, began to sound the alarm. They were like, hey, the United States is definitely backing what's going on in Chile, and it's really bad. Like, this is what our relatives are telling us. People who'd escaped were like, this is what I saw. And this kind of like Chilean activist movement started popping up in the United States, and the United States was obviously really worried that it was picking up steam. There was one Chilean activist in particular named Orlando Letelier, who had been the U.S. ambassador under Allende. During the coup, like the rest of Allende's staff, he was taken to a concentration camp. But international pressure was so severe for him to be released that he was allowed to leave, and he came to the United States with some other exiles. In the United States, he ended up taking a job at the Institute for Policy Studies in Washington, D.C. And one of the more overtly shocking things that the U.S. allowed in the United States, not, what they permitted in Chile, which was obviously horrifying, but in the United States, just in terms of like American sovereignty, something that happened that really shocked a lot of people is that they allowed foreign agents working under the orders of Pinochet to plant a car bomb on Letelier's car in Washington's Sheridan Circle, which exploded on September 21st, 1976, and did, yes, kill Letelier and his American coworker, Ronnie Moffett. So basically, Ronnie Moffett, an American, was killed on American soil by Pinochet.
I mean, I feel like with the CIA, some of it is like the overt propaganda and like actually just killing people. A lot of it is putting the gun in someone's hand, being like, you want to. And I feel like a lot with Pinochet is that for them.
Yeah, no, it's really true. Pinochet, at one point when Reagan was president, he ended up fighting a lot with Pinochet. Yeah, there was a lot of conflict because Pinochet was a dictator. He was a petty tyrant. He was a little man who thought himself a god. And that is what the CIA does. They find people who want to, and they incentivize them to do so, and they give them all the resources necessary to ensure they're successful.
Yeah.
So, what does all of this have to do with our boy Milton? Well, in 1956, a Catholic college in Chile had begun to send letters in exchange with the University of Chicago. And what they decided was to do kind of an exchange program. They would send Chicago professors to Chile and Chilean students to Chicago. And the U.S. government brokered this deal because they were hoping to influence locals in Chile with anti-Marxist, pro-capitalist economic ideas. The government, for its part, showed in declassified documents that its goal was, quote, resisting Marxist influences in economic and political institutions. So in 1975, when Chile is in dictatorial collapse, basically, it just makes sense that this military junta, backed by the U.S., would reach out to the Chicago boys to help them restructure the economy. And remember, the CIA, who helped broker this deal to send budding economists to Chicago to learn, and Chicago economic professors to Chile, they also conveniently helped write the BRIC, the new economic policy. So, it hasn't been proven that the Chicago boys, the Chicago School of Chicago economic theorists there, wrote the BRIC, but they worked with the CIA, and the CIA, we know, did write it. So it's not a big leap.
So, right, if the CIA wrote those acknowledgement pages that you see at the beginning of the book, that's like, I'd really like to thank my wife for being so supportive of me. I'd really like to thank my editors. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
Milton Friedman would be in there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Definitely. But it's also possible he just straight up helped write it. Yeah. And it's just covert and hasn't been released. So 1975, Milton himself goes to Chile and he meets with Pinochet. Also, while he was there, he delivered a series of lectures and public talks about his economic theories. And he had this plan to help craft Chile in his own image of the ideal capitalist utopia. He was like, this is going to be the capitalist free market utopia of my dreams. I'm going to be able to do things here that I can't do in the United States because of pesky regulations. Basically, this is what Naomi Klein talks about when she says, like, the shock doctrine. It's like everything collapsed so badly that I can clear the playing field quickly and we can implement a bunch of new policies rapid fire as quickly as we can, and nobody will even know it hit them.
I love everything here collapsed, air quotes.
Yeah.
Right, where it's like, we knocked everything down.
We knocked everything down, yeah. It was the CIA did this. It didn't collapse of its own free will, yeah. Or its own failures. So Pinochet, though, got kind of worried. He's like, if we drop public spending this abruptly, it's going to lead to massive unemployment. And he was right, for the record. It would.
Yeah.
And Milton was like, don't worry. Things are going to get worse for a bit, but then they're going to be so good, which to me echoes the Kuznets curve theory from early in Milton's career. Yeah, things are going to get terrible, but then they're going to be amazing. You just have to push through all the bad stuff. So we really see Milton believes, yeah, something good's going to emerge from the ashes. So he leaves Chile, and then he sends Pinochet a letter. And he says, you have to administer shock treatment to the Chilean economy to cure it of its runaway inflation, which was starting to take hold. So he says, yeah, you need to drastically cut public spending. You need to privatize state-owned enterprises. You need to eliminate wage and price controls. And you need to deregulate financial markets and foreign trade. And you need to basically do that to allow in a lot of American and European companies. So from here, the Chicago boys get to work working with Chile. Chileans, though, were skeptical. Like in Santiago, one newsman pointed out that in the United States, the government applies far more controls on the economy than Milton was recommending they do in Chile. And Milton replied, I have always been against it. I don't approve of them. I believe we should not apply them. I am against economic intervention by the government in my own country as well as in Chile or anywhere else. So really what's happening, though, is Milton is like, yeah, we're trying something new we've never done before, but acting with so much authority, he's like, this is what you do. This is how America's so successful. But in the same breath, being like, we don't do this in America.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So by December of 1975, the Chicago Boys' economic theories had taken root so dramatically that now 1 hour of work at the official minimum wage would purchase just 160 grams of bread, or the equivalent of 4 slices.
I'm sorry. At the average 12 to 14 hour type working day, that presumably with no regulations on wages, think how many slices of bread that is. That's like, you have surplus bread.
Okay, well, I did the math, and this would be the equivalent of a loaf of bread, which usually has 24 slices, costing $43.50 in the United States today based on our federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour.
That's a good price. Is it?
You've been shopping in Erewhon lately. You got the 1-bedroom apartment, and now all of a sudden you're going to Whole Foods in Erewhon for your shopping.
Are you kidding me? I'm shopping at Lazy Acres.
Lazy Acres? What is that?
Lazy Acres is basically, I don't know if it's off-brand Erewhon or off-brand Whole Foods. It's like, it's the mid-price point between Erewhon and they have a poke bar.
Oh, interesting. Well, yeah, I think even there, probably the bread is not costing you $43. And, you know, this is dismal. Purchasing power fell to 40% of what it had been in 1970. By the end of 1975, Chile's annual rate of inflation had reached 341%, the highest in the world.
But it's about to get so good.
It's going to get so good if you guys should just get through this. Just give me one more free market. I just need one more free market, guys. On top of that, just 2 milk companies now controlled the entire market. More than 80% of paper in Chile came from just one company. Monopolization was taking hold, and these businesses were, like huge companies extracting profit out of these low wages they were paying these Chileans. The real income of the poor in Chile plummeted, but the share of national income in the hands of the top 5% of richest people in Chile doubled.
So they're super free.
The rich in Chile are the freest, and the poor, not only being subjected to Pinochet's brutal regime of just murdering people, death camps, torture horrible. Yeah. They were also starving to death. Families are starving to death. In 1976, 3 Chicago graduates had total control of the economy in Chile. We've got Sergio de Castro as the Minister of Finance. We've got Pablo Barona as the Minister of the Economy, and Alvaro Bardon in the Central Bank. Meanwhile, living conditions for average people in Chile just really, really abysmal. By July, approximately 2.5 million Chileans, which is about a quarter of the population there, they had no income at all. They survived just by getting food and clothing distributions from churches and humanitarian groups.
They didn't deregulate the churches and privatize the churches? What the fuck?
Privatize the churches.
Yeah.
This is what they need to do next. What would Jesus do? Substantial increases in malnutrition came along. Infant mortality was just through the roof. It jumped 18% during the first year of the military government. Allende, for the record, had managed to reduce infant mortality significantly in the brief amount of time he actually was able to govern. Thousands of people begging on the streets ended up appearing, which had not been a normal sight in Chile before. By 1977, every political party had been formally dissolved. And Milton's, yes, European contemporary, Hayek, who was that founder of the Mont Pelerin Society, he wrote a letter to a German newspaper saying that everyone was being really unfair in critiquing Pinochet's government. He was like, Amnesty International keeps complaining that people are getting tortured and murdered. I just think they're being way too hard on the guy. And the newspaper was like, we will not publish this. Like, what are you saying? Which, it says a lot, because Germany is very pro-Israel right now.
I mean, the funny thing is, like, Hayek has this, like, reputation as this, like, dour but honest. Like, I've read leftists who enjoy quoting him for, like...
Oh, whoa.
There's always a, like, he's hard-nosed in a way that's interesting thing that, I don't know, some leftists like. But, like, he's just another guy with an opinion. He's just
And his opinion is that Pinochet is warm and cuddly if you give him a chance.
Yeah, and it's those infants just didn't wait for the curve to curve.
Yeah, exactly. And he's like, yeah, some kids died. So?
I feel like if you're starting
free market
with, some kids died.
Yeah, exactly.
You're off on the wrong foot.
You're off on the wrong foot, exactly. So in 1978, all but 7 of the hundreds of companies that Allende had nationalized, all but 7 had been reprivatized. In 1979, reforms were further introduced that reduced the power of unions, decentralized the school systems, and replaced pensions with individual retirement accounts, per Milton's recommendation. And while all of this was happening, in 1980, Milton Friedman had a PBS special that was being shown on Chilean state television to help advance, this like referendum of Pinochet's new constitution he wanted to pass. And there's this guy, Patrick Eiber, who's an associate professor of history at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and also the author of Neither Peace Nor Freedom, The Cultural Cold War in Latin America. He says the idea that capitalism was the highest form of freedom was used by the dictatorship to claim that its authoritarian project was advancing freedom, the freedoms embedded in the market, rather than denying political freedoms. So the Chicago Boys themselves argued that they were, implementing freedom in Chile and creating the right conditions to establish human rights. Not in opposition to Pinochet, but in opposition to the surely totalitarian reign of terror they imagined that the democratically elected socialist Allende maybe would have put them in by nationalizing some copper mines. So they really are brainwashed by this. They're thinking like, no, the path to freedom is the free market. We're going to be so free. By 1982, Milton was publicly calling Pinochet's Chile a miracle. Because for a few rich guys, business was booming. There had been this massive transfer of wealth to the rich. But Chile was entering a severe economic recession due primarily to the lack of regulation in the banking sector. The Minister of Economy, Pablo Baranoa, said the company was educated in weakness, basically saying you're not strong enough to make it through the bad times to get to the good times ahead. Bankruptcies, meanwhile, were skyrocketing. Admiral Jose Toribio Marino said, "Let fall those who must fall. Such is the jungle of economic life, a jungle of savage beasts, where he who can kill the one next to him kills him. That is the reality."
So it's very Hobbesian. That's the idea that nature bred in tooth and claw kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, but to me, I'm just like, if you're thinking this way, what even is the benefit of a society? What even is the benefit of coming down to other people to build, or coming together with other people to build a community? If you're just like, it's just like being out in the jungle and we all just kill each other. It's like, why not just be out in the jungle and we all kill each other then?
Well, no, that's like a lot of the sort of neoliberal thinkers. I can't remember if it's Enoch Powell or Margaret Thatcher who famously claimed there is no society.
Yeah.
There's just this is a rejection of society, which is why I was like, oh, it's like how you conceive of the individual. There is no society. It's just a bunch of individuals fighting each other.
Right. It's a very antisocial way of thinking.
Yeah.
The effects, though, in Chile were so disastrous that guy De Castro ended up losing his job. The guy who was the Minister of Finance. Chile's GDP fell by 13%. And in an open letter to Friedman and Harbinger, who was his contemporary, Andre Gunder Frank denounced what he called an economic genocide happening in Chile. So Pinochet was like, we can't we can't do this anymore. So he brought on a new team, not the Chicago boys. They were still capitalists, and a lot of them were from American colleges, but they were more flexible in their ideology.
I really think University of Chicago ought to put Pinochet on their, like, letterhead.
I mean, it's really shocking how little accountability, you know?
Yeah.
That anybody in the United States, like, there's been no accountability for what we did to Chile. I mean, but Chile, unfortunately, is one of many countries that the United States did horrible, awful things to in the name of experimenting with the free market or trying to advance capitalism around the world. So by the mid-1980s, finally, Chile's economy began to slowly recover. By 1989, though, average wages were still worse than they had been in 1970 before Pinochet took power. Income distribution was worse also, so that meant there was more inequality. And in the 1990s, a reformist center-left coalition took power, and they worked to further restore the Chilean economy. So labor rights were restored a little bit, new social programs were introduced, and they retained the market economy and low tax rates, though. Also, the openness to foreign business. So it's not like they were socialists, they were capitalists, but they were a far cry from the Chicago boys.
They got to the other side of the curve.
I don't know about that.
That's ironic.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. I don't know. It's like they just did normal capitalism, and normal capitalism compared to what Milton Friedman had been advocating was so extreme.
I mean, they did, you know, like, because obviously there's no such thing as pure capitalism.
Right.
Milton Friedman got as close as, or I guess Pinochet in Chile got as close as possible, but obviously there's still, like, government enforcing a free market.
Yeah. So in the end, basically, the thing to take from this is that when Friedman had the chance to help craft the country of his dreams based on his economic proposals, just with a bunch of his contemporaries who agreed with him and all wanted the same thing, it was a shit show that took decades to recover from. So let's go back now to Friedman's life while all of this is happening.
Yeah, okay, so while Pinochet is putting people in death camps and children are starving on the street.
And Milton is going there going, you guys are doing awesome. Keep it up. What a miracle. Love Pinochet. He's my guy. In 1976, Milton retired from the University of Chicago, and he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Economics. While his economic policies are destroying a country and contributing to the starvation of millions of people.
This is, okay, here's my thing. The Nobel Prize is always a good sign that someone is bullshit. And, like,
It's
literally
so true.
anything.
Yes, it is so true. The Nobel Committee said it is very rare for an economist to wield such influence directly and indirectly, not only on the direction of scientific research, but also on actual policies.
So they're not even saying he's good, they're just saying he's influential.
Yeah, and they're like, he's actually responsible for a lot of material change that has happened in the United States and by default in other countries around the world, like Chile.
He's the Rod Stewart Live of economists.
What? No, I don't understand this reference.
He's influential but bad.
Oh, okay. I don't know if I would agree that Rod Stewart is bad.
No, I just think the Live album is bad.
Oh, okay. I haven't heard that one, so maybe. Meanwhile, though, people know what's going on in Chile. It's not like nobody in the United States knows what's up. A protester in the crowd during the Nobel Prize ceremony yells, "Freedom for Chile, crush capitalism," and has to get, like, dragged out. This, though, like the Nobel Prize thing, it kind of made official that, like, the United States was just deciding Milton was right. And this marked the turning of the tide away from 3 decades of Keynesian economics and instead towards the Chicago School of Economics way of thinking that he had helped at this point basically co-found. So the following year, he became a member of the Hoover Institution on War, Revolution, and Peace, which is a conservative think tank at Stanford. And he ended up moving to San Francisco to work there. And he created a PBS TV show, the one that we talked about, that they showed in Chile.
On
as,
state
like,
television.
propaganda.
So I'm just going to throw this out there. One thing that wasn't deregulated, state television.
Yep.
They had to show Milton's special.
Milton's propaganda. Milton's PBS TV show, which he created with his wife, which was called Free to Choose. So all the freedom propaganda really hitting hard. And this, yes, just extolled the virtues of a free market system. In the late 1970s, the United States decided to actually implement some of Milton's monetarist policies. They're like, okay, Milton, you're our guy. Let's do it.
Let's do Chile.
Let's do it. So remember how he was so into that monetarism thing, that idea that if you just controlled the money supply, you could control all of inflation and kind of put the economy on autopilot? So the US was like, all right, let's give it a go. So the Federal Reserve attempted monetarism by steadily growing the money supply to control inflation in the late 1970s. And the result was a painful recession from 1981 with interest rates at the highest levels since the Civil War and unemployment in the double digits. In 1980, a book came out called Free to Choose, yes, again, based on Milton's PBS TV show, and it became the best-selling nonfiction book of 1980. All while in the United States and in Chile, Milton's economic theories were proving to be complete nightmares that did not work at all. Along with the book, though, also came a set of educational videos with the same name. Meanwhile, we get to see some other real-world examples of what happens when Milton's economic theories are implemented, and we get to see it in the UK. So you mentioned Margaret Thatcher earlier.
Big Milton Friedman fan.
Big Milton Friedman fan. She is an avowed monetarist. She's like, this monetarist thing is so great. We're going to autopilot the economy. She is prime minister. And guess what? Inflation is starting to get out of control in the UK. So what does she do? She follows Milton Friedman's plan. Theoretically, controlling the money supply is supposed to curb inflation, right? Well, by 1982, inflation had jumped to 23% in the UK with her implementing Milton's advice.
Can we pause here for just a second? Because one of the things that's always so galling to me about this is where, for like, government intervention does and does not happen in these cases, because both Reagan and Thatcher viciously fought unions and union organizing, which is a kind of freedom within the marketplace, right? Like, it is workers choosing to be free with their labor,
right,
in an organized way. And sort of neoliberal whatever bullshit people, anytime labor tries to organize, they'll shut that shit down real quick.
Because it's not actually about freedom, obviously.
It's not about freedom. It's like, it's not just hypocrite, it's a lie. Like, all of these people, Milton Friedman included, are lying about what their intentions and goals and values are.
Yes, totally. Their intentions, their goals, their values, it's just to advance the interests of business. So, you know, Thatcher, when she tried to do Milty's plan, it tanked everything worse, and she had to completely abandon monetarism. As this is happening, though, Milton is still arguing against government intervention in the economy. That same year, in a Newsweek column, he said, if you put the federal government in charge of the Sahara Desert, in 5 years, there'd be a shortage of sand. People actually thought this was really funny, though, because in reality, the Sahara Desert is, mostly owned by national governments already. And somebody pointed it out, and they're like, hey, it is actually owned by national governments and has been for years, and guess what? There's no shortage of sand. So in 1982, the USA and the UK have both tried and completely abandoned Milton's monetarism in practice. It obviously failed. Milton, though, still staunchly defended it, saying that the Federal Reserve just didn't implement it the right way. He said monetarism would work if the Fed plugged the policy into a computer and relied mostly on the computer to steer the economy. This is the old self-driving Tesla thing. And everyone kind of recognized that his whole motivation for saying this is, because he believed that the Federal Reserve should grow the money supply at a steady, low fixed rate without, even small deviations in response to economic conditions, because putting the monetary policies of the country on autopilot would limit the amount of people working in the government with their hands on the economy and create an even smaller government. So in 1983, he became the Professor Emeritus? I don't know what this is.
Emeritus professor.
Emeritus.
Basically, he was retired, right? Like, he's retired, but they were like, wow, you're so important that we're like, if you go to the faculty page, I mean, there's no faculty website in 1983. If you go to the faculty newsletter, it will have Milton Friedman as emeritus professor, just to be like, he taught here, he's on like the board, he does things with like on the
So it's
he's
like advertising for the school because he's so awesome, and
he's
also
like
honoring him
and being like, he's kind of like our spiritual like direction guy.
Okay.
Like, he's like, when you think University of Chicago, they should really make this their slogan. When you think University of Chicago, think Milton
Pinochet.
Think Pinochet.
Yeah. So this happens. The University of Chicago is like, Milty, love him. Do more of him. We're just going to keep doing Milton Friedman, even though, again, Chile, the United States, the UK have all been like, these policies did not work. So in 1986, the New York Times reported that Beryl Sprinkle hell of a name, I'm just going to say. President Reagan's chief economist and one of the most tenacious partisans of monetarism, according to the article, had publicly disavowed all of Milton's monetarist theories. So even Reagan's guys at this point are like, Milton's full of shit.
Yeah.
Reagan's guys. So monetarism, had just been pretty much debunked. And remember, monetarism had said, the growth of the nation's supply of money, the deposits in bank accounts, the cash in people's pockets would determine the economy's future growth and inflation. But the money supply at this time began running ahead of economic growth in a way that monetarists could not explain. So on July 3rd, 1986, New York Times reported, if the Fed followed monetarist theory now, its actions would likely throw the economy into a devastating recession. It would order a sharp reduction in the money supply, leading to soaring interest rates. So everyone's just like, this does not make sense. Meanwhile, though, Milton is still highly regarded in the world of economics. So that same year, Milton and his Chicago school colleague Arnold Harbinger participated in a symposium on the relations between economic, political, and civic freedom organized by the Fraser Institute, which was a pro-market Canadian think tank. And the premise of the symposium was that economic freedom and civil liberties could flourish in conditions in which political freedom was absent. Basically, they're saying democracy has no particular virtues, and actually the free market is freest under a dictatorship. So, Harbinger also employed racism to get this point across, and he has this quote where he says, Latin Americans had a predilection to romanticism, a tremendous, incredible vulnerability to demagogy, and a collective tendency towards self-pity.
So this is like some old school racism. This is like when people called Italians Latins back in like the 18th century.
The fiery Latin romantics. Military governments, he said, were best at leading them to think their way out of it. So he's basically like anybody in South America, they just need basically a dictator military government to tell them what to think, because their own thinking, not great. So really, really repulsive behavior coming out of these guys. So in 1987, Alan Greenspan became chair of the Fed, which is ironic to me considering the Fed's creation was part of Keynes' recommendations post-Great Depression. But Greenspan himself was a proponent of the Chicago School. He was a monetarist in his thoughts about the money supply and a follower of, that like Ayn Rand style libertarianism. He was into all this. In 1991, meanwhile, a National Commission for Truth and Reconciliation report documented that there had been roughly 2,300 people killed for political reasons in Chile under Pinochet's regime. That also included almost 1,000 cases of enforced disappearances. And this just touched on what occurred in Chile operating under Milton Friedman's vision of freedom, which we know, based on what his colleague Harbinger said, this type of economic freedom they believed could only flourish in a situation like Pinochet. So to them, they were like, Pinochet and like our version of a free market, hand in hand. We love it. And as this was going on, 1998, the Friedmans, him and his wife, they published their memoirs called Two Lucky People. Really repulsive behavior.
Yeah.
By 2004, 2005, a National Commission on Political Imprisonment and Torture, they had a report that found that 28,459 people were arrested for political reasons, and that most of them were victims of torture in Chile under Pinochet. And the total number of people officially recognized as disappeared in Chile or killed between 1973 and 1990 stands at 3,216, and survivors of political imprisonment and or torture at 38,254. In 2006, though, we see no justice. Milton Friedman died of heart failure in San Francisco. His son, David D. Friedman, is an anarcho-capitalist who has written books on what he calls radical capitalism without any government intervention. And you cannot make this up. It is the natural extension of his father's work.
Yeah.
Wild. So in 2020, Joe Biden actually said during his campaign, Milton Friedman is not running the show anymore. And to his credit, he did deliver on this a little bit. He ignored warnings against deficit spending and secured 3 major increases in public investment passed by Congress. So those 3 things were a nearly $1 trillion Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which added $550 billion in new investment in physical infrastructure over 5 years, which is good because the United States has been falling apart. Second, it's a nearly $500 billion Inflation Reduction Act focused on energy security and climate change. And 3, a $280 billion Chips and Science Act focused on microchips production. I don't know much about these acts. I would like to look into them. But what's notable is that together these mark the largest increase in public investment since Roosevelt's New Deal reforms in the 1930s. And, then again, Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society reforms in the 1960s. So this does to a lot of people signify a return to Keynesian economics, right? Milton's old foe. But this sentiment is not being echoed in places where the United States exerts its power internationally, because we are still using other countries as our weird little testing ground for super free market ideology. And the way we see this play out a lot is with the IMF. So again, we have an episode about the IMF that you can listen to, but just as kind of, I don't know, like a brief summary, the IMF issues loans to exploited countries. And when they issue these loans, it is contingent on those countries deciding to use Milton-style policies of financial austerity coupled with limited democracy, which have been proven to hurt countries even further. So a 2022 study found that the IMF expects 143 countries around the world currently to be engaged in Milton Friedman-style fiscal austerity. In 2023, this comprised nearly 85% of the world's population. So more than 6.3 billion people in the world today are living under Milton Friedman's kind of ideologies. And the United States, our role in that, we're the largest shareholder in the IMF. We have built-in veto power on the executive board, and we exercise disproportionate influence over decision-making there. So while the Biden administration was, publicly saying, like, Milton Friedman's out, this doesn't work, meanwhile, the Treasury Department was taking steps at the IMF to promote policies that did the opposite, that reinforced Milton Friedman's economic policies. So yeah, basically the United States continues to use the world as an experimental testing ground for our failed ideas of the free market. So this kind of gets us towards the end of the episode, but I've got some interesting kind of like things this makes me think about. Like, first of all, just like how many times do free market policies have to be proven wrong or like as failures before we acknowledge they fail?
I mean, I think the thing is, the easiest thing to do is to just start acknowledging that these people, it's not like they made a good faith hypothesis.
They're grifters.
They are lying.
They are grifters.
And it's like stop being like, wow, they really tried something.
No.
The scientific method means that you always have to keep doing the experiment. That's not what's happening here. They're lying to you. Yeah,
they are lying to you to make, like in the case of Chile, 10 rich guys super rich.
Yeah.
So perhaps ironically, Milton once famously said, one of the great mistakes is to judge policies and programs by their intentions rather than their results. And I just think this is hilarious because his theories have the horror of both being ill-intended, right? They're set up to let businesses just like be some gunslinging cowboy in the wild, wild west where anything goes, and with poor outcomes, resulting in massive inflation upticks and unemployment everywhere they go. So the thing I keep coming back to is how utterly useless humans are at predicting behavior and how extra useless economists are at doing so. And I actually had to look into this. I was just like, why are economists so bad at predicting human behavior? And I learned something. David, if you had to guess why, do you know why economists are so bad at predicting what humans will do?
Because they're not human.
Basically, they do not behave like other humans, typically speaking.
Yeah.
So this is just like an interesting way to end out the episode. Studies have found that economists tend to act more selfishly than average people in controlled experiments when it comes to talking about money, sure, but also just like generally helping other people. In 1945, the psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott had denounced economics and was like, that's the science of greed. But it turns out there actually might be something to that. Do you know about game theory, David?
I feel like, honestly, the most I know about it is something I read in a David Foster Wallace novel, so I'm going to say nothing.
Okay, yeah. So it basically says that there's a predictable way that people will react when interacting with other people or scenarios based on rationality that will give them the best possible outcome. And it exists in economics. It's usually modeled on a mathematical formula. You play chess, so you probably understand this. You could anticipate how people will react based on what's rational a lot of the time.
I feel like I'm at the level of chess where I see the sort of games that people it's like, oh, I know they're playing a Scotch game, or I know they're doing this opening, and so I know that this is how they're going to.
Right.
I have a little book of things Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so yeah, that's basically game theory. You can kind of guess how people are going to respond because you observe them doing something. You're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Now they're going to do this, and it's going to be in their self-interest. So the issue, it turns out, is that a substantial number of people don't behave according to prediction software game theory, right? They just don't. And the reason is because people actually care about other people. So they don't just act in their own self-interest. Like, the world is not just like a fun game for you to win, right? Like,
there is society.
There is society, and people do tend to think about everyone around them too. The people who are more likely to think selfishly, though, and operate according to game theory, in a couple of studies, it's been economics students. So economics students were found to be more willing to harm other people, more willing to deceive other people, less likely to lend aid to other people, and to share less in regulated studies. So in short, they displayed less pro-social behavior. And additional studies found that once people go through training in economics, getting an economics degree, they are more likely afterwards to engage in this kind of antisocial behavior.
Don't trust your local economist.
Yeah, so what this kind of tells me is that the way we teach economics today tells students the only acceptable way to act is in your own self-interest. And what I came up with is that, yeah, I think we have to kill all the economists.
I mean,
I think death to the economists is my new outlook on life.
I don't know. I could do with like a sort of like, cultural revolution style re-education camp.
Okay,
that's
re-educate the economists is what David says.
Like, make them all have to do like the obnoxious feeling stick or some shit. They,
yeah.
like, pass around the feeling, like, do anything that just like makes them acknowledge the existence of other people for 5 minutes.
They need to do the flour baby test, where they carry around a bag of flour and they act like it's a baby.
Something
like that.
Honestly, ironically, if you made them take like a 50s style home ec class,
that could be good.
That would
caregiving, nurturing.
Yeah.
We need to re-educate the economists because we're breaking them and they are breaking our country.
I mean, I think they are
they are breaking each other.
Yeah.
They are breaking each other and we are all the victims.
This is like a death cult where the only people who get out alive are the people in the cult.
Are the economists.
Okay, I guess it's just a murder cult then.
That's a murder cult. Yeah. We are all globally the victims of the economists. So that's what I came up with. That's the Milton Friedman episode. Do you have any interesting further points to add when we're talking about Milty Boy and the horrors and atrocities of his economic policies?
Nope. Fuck that guy.
Yeah, we don't like him. I don't like him.
I mean, when we did the Kissinger thing, like, Kissinger believed that there are like 5 guys who like
are important,
and they're like not the guys you usually talk about. Like, it's not the actual leaders,
right?
And this feels like that, where it's like, oh, some asshole professor like decided to write letters to Pinochet, and here we all fucking are. And Chile has been dealing with the ramifications for decades. Yeah. Okay. Well, that is it. I think episode done. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Pick Me Up, I'm Scared. If you would like to join us on Patreon, you can find us there at patreon.com/pickmeupimscared. For $3 a month, you can access bonus content there. But if $3 a month is too much for you to spend right now, we totally get it, and we're just happy you're here. As always, you can find the sources for this week's episode just by scrolling down a bit in the description.